on the pollinator. Well, good evening and welcome to the January 30th, 2020 business meeting. With that, I'll ask the County Administrator, Gary Schmidt, to please take the roll.
Yes, Chair. First, our staff support tonight, Nate Boderman, County Counsel, Mary Rathke, Clerk to the Board. Roll call, Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Chair Bernard.
Here, please join me in a pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, first up, we have citizen communication, and we'll start with Jerry Tenbush, Estacada City Councilor. Oh, and Beth, why don't you also come up from the census? Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Tenbush, City Councilor of Estacada. The reason I came tonight, one of my friends is here for the pollinator issue, but I figured this would give me an opportunity to bring something to your guys' attention. So Estacada, growing as we are, hundreds of homes going in every year. The route from Estacada to Oregon City that is going to be get a lot more traffic is 211 to Hayden Road, Springwater, and then Redland Road, Springwater to Redland Road into Oregon City, Gladstone. So there's three spots in this route that are very dimly lit, and I will go through the proper channels of getting a hold of the proper person at the county. But I'd like to see some streetlights at the corner of 211 and Hayden, not a stoplight, just an overhead streetlight, just to light the area. There's a lot of accidents at that intersection of Hayden and 211. And then Springwater and Hayden Road up at the top. Turning onto Hayden Road, it's a very, very dark turn. And a lot of people could miss that turn. And then, of course, Springwater and Redland Road, there's no lighting there either. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention that I'm going to be going through the proper channels to request lights in these spots, but it's not something I can do on a council level, city council level. So I don't even know if that will even make it to you guys, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it's something I feel that is necessary with the booming of our population. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Beth?
Hi, my name is Beth Federici, and I'm here representing the 2020 census. And as we all know, the biennial census is coming up here in the spring, so we want to get a complete count, which is extremely important for especially the Portland metro region. We've grown so much in 10 years, and as everyone knows, a proper complete count of the census will lead to more federal funding and possibly even more congressional representation. I'm here to say that we need boots on the ground and we're still hiring. So we want to make sure that everybody in Clackamas and Multnomah County know that we have these great jobs. They start at $18 an hour. They're a flexible schedule. And we are going to be particularly this next couple of days doing a big push. We're going to be at the Oregon City Library tomorrow from 11 to 6, helping people apply, giving them answers to questions. These are great jobs that people should take advantage of. You can apply, everyone applies online at 2020census.gov/jobs, but we're also there to just help you through the process if you need a little extra help. Like I said, the complete count is dependent that we have enough census takers out there to do the job. And the unemployment rate has been so low in Oregon that we've had our work cut out for us. So we need your help. Tell everyone you know, you only have to be 18, so it's perfect for high school seniors who want to get that on their resume. They work for the federal government, college students, retirees. We ask for 20 to 40 hours a week. So for folks who need full-time work, this is great. But if you're just supplementing your income, it's great. It doesn't affect SNAP benefits and some other benefits that have income caps. So there's literally no downside to applying. If we call you for the job and you don't want it, you can tell us you're not available anymore. But we need everyone to just go online and get their hat in the ring. That'll be helpful for the state. So thank you so much, and get everybody out there.
Thanks. I think Paul has a question. Maybe he
Oh,
needs
yeah.
a job. And they
Yeah, I probably
County's
could.
not paying you now?
Keep me out of trouble. If you just highlight, and you kind of touched on it, but the risk of an undercount is that we wouldn't get as much of our share of the federal funding
Exactly.
that we'd be eligible for, and that's the funding goes towards
Schools,
for
roads,
food,
hospitals.
a number so for the homeless all the people that are in
Exactly.
need of services and so forth.
Exactly.
That's money that will go up to other states.
Absolutely.
So it's there to be used. We don't get the accurate count. We don't get the accurate amount of money.
It's
So-
$3,600 per person? Is that right?
Ah, you caught me on the spot. I'm not sure exactly what the
I think I heard
calculation
that
is per population.
I believe that's about right.
3,600 a person.
And I believe in 2010, we were undercounted. And with the increase in population over the last 10 years, if anybody's driven on our roads, those potholes are there because we didn't have enough money maybe to fix them from the federal government. So let's all get out there. So I'm here mainly for jobs, but the census is going out in a couple of months. So real message, please fill it out. Everyone will be able to go out online and fill out the census. We will also be at libraries and community centers, helping people who maybe don't have access online or don't feel comfortable doing it online. We will be there to help you. Our goal is a complete count. So whatever we have to do to help you guys get the word out, please let us know.
What was that website again?
It is 2020census.gov/jobs. So
Great, I know
get out
somebody.
there and do it. And then, of course, the 2020 census is where you can find all information about the census itself.
Great.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Great. Please just reach out to our office if you do.
All right, thanks. So I think this says Paul, is that Paul?
Yes,
Okay.
that looks like Paul Staley.
Paul Staley and John Millison?
Yes, ma'am.
Just tell us who you are and where you live.
Thank you. I'm John Millison. I live in Oregon City on South Central Point Road.
I'm Paul Staley. I live on South Central Point Road as well.
Go ahead.
Dear Clackamas County Commissioners, my name is Paul Staley. I'm a fourth-generation dairy farmer at 21303 South Central Point Road. The reason I am here tonight is because of safety concerns over the new intersection at Central Point and New Era. To date, 2 members of my family have been involved in serious accidents. When my father coming home from the market and my sister Jan on her way to a vacation. I myself was involved in an accident on 11/16/2019 when I was turning off Central Point into a driveway where we rent land, when a Corvette hit the backside of my manure spreader, totaling out the Corvette and causing several thousands to repair my spreader. Thank God no one was killed. No one was cited. The other insurance company called to talk to me about the accident. What I thought could have been done to avoid it, I simply said, if the Corvette would have been going a little slower speed, he would have had time to react. With that being said, over the years, there's more traffic going much faster than the posted limit with complete lack of acknowledgement of the double yellow line in the road. That coupled with police presence only after an accident occurs. Safety is a major concern on our farm. We recently purchased rollover protection for every tractor which is to operate on the road, with every operator to wear the seat belt. So when a car or a big truck hits my equipment, the operator has a chance of survival. In summertime, we put signs out warning tractors on the road. Also, the current proposed project jeopardizes the safety of, I didn't get it all written out right here, my son's young children playing in their backyard. My concerns over the current proposal is the same as the old design, and that is too many people run the stop signs for whatever reason, and I think as long as the east and westbound lanes of New Era can go 45-plus miles per hour, couple that with distractions, cell phones, eating, drinking, the concerns still are there. There are many ways to fix any problem. In my mind, a simple way, four-way stop with flashing lights that tell the driver slow down, stop ahead, traffic cameras in effect, fines double or severe penalties. Or a simple turning circle where everyone has to slow down. I have spoke to the neighbors of the property involved, and no one is happy with the new proposal. My neighbors are willing to do whatever it takes to make a safe intersection. Once again, thank you for your time, and does anyone have any questions for me?
Not yet.
Have you been in contact with the sheriff's office?
Which time?
Okay. Do you have any kind of a email? Have you tried to call or email, or what form of communication have you tried to reach out to the sheriff's office?
When would I call the sheriff?
Yeah, I drive this every day, 2-3 times a day, because I live on New Era. And it's been a problem as long as I can remember. I've seen helicopters on your property taking people out. And they've done some stuff, but I haven't seen this project. We're happy to take a look at it.
I mean, I'm happy that they're going to do something. I just don't think they're doing the right thing. It only addresses part of the problems.
Okay. Ken had a question of.
Yeah, you mentioned a traffic circle that might require the taking of land to do a traffic circle, to have enough space to do it. Is that something that people would work with?
I've talked to my neighbors, all that are involved, and they're thumbs up on it.
Okay,
I
thank you.
don't know that they put traffic circles on hills like that, but.
That may be
take a
the
look.
problem, I
I've
don't
seen
know,
'em-
but
I've seen them in Bend, and they make it work. It surprised me.
Okay.
I'm John Millison, again from Oregon City. Continuing on this topic, there is a preliminary traffic study that we're referring to that has been, some people have been aware of that. I've not seen it, but others in our group have. It proposes an option, I assume, that it looks like they're all headed towards that direction. And how many options are being considered that are accomplishing the safety requirements? That's something I'd like to know. Are there options available that we have not seen? Are there options that have not been presented due to economics? And the last one, have there been any options considered that include support from adjacent property owners willing to donate some of their land to accomplish this project, keeping the Staley property intact, thus avoiding the reduction of the setback and barriers that are already in place and we think that would be a safety issue based on the traffic flow through that area. So we're curious to see if what they're proposing is based on economics, or if they have a better one that did not have to deal with economics. Maybe there's something involved with this land swapping that would help.
So I'll look into I hadn't heard about this at all. Maybe I should read my mail. But I'd be happy to find out. I noticed that there are some folks from the winery here tonight, that maybe we could have a community meeting and look at some of those options. I don't know how far they are on this project, but I'll find out. And you gave us your emails. We'll contact you and let you know.
We'll do a follow-up.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll follow up. Is it Burt or Buell? Burl. And Frank. Good evening.
Hi.
Is this is the proposed?
This is the proposed.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, my name's Burl Mostall, and I own Villa Catalana Cellars and Rare Plant Research, which is on the corner of Kreitzer Road and Central Point, less than a mile from this intersection we're talking about. And I should preface this, but I'm not a fan of California, but when I was wine tasting down in Sonoma County, I ran into something I think could solve this problem. It was pretty clear it was a pretty serious intersection that I came up upon, and what they had was several things. There was a stop sign that had embedded LED lights in it, so when you came up, it was on a motion detector, it started flashing, but before the stop sign, they had I don't know what you call them. There's actually reflector lights on stands that may be 4 or 5 feet high. Those were also LED lit, and they would actually, as you approach the intersection, they would come on, and they would actually travel as you went. And so they came on, and they would flash and then come off. By the time you got to the stop sign, you knew that something was going on, and you better pay close attention. In fact, it was almost like the Strip in Las Vegas. It was so much. So I did some checking here with the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, and they're talking about embedded LED signs, and they're saying that a stop sign with the LEDs can reduce people just blowing through the stop sign by 52.9%. And people that slow down but don't completely stop, they can drop it by 28.9%. Now, I imagine with these other lights, it would reduce that even more. I couldn't find anything on the internet about those lights on the stands, but I did find stuff on road guidance lights that are actually embedded in the road. The neat thing about this, I also found a place you can buy these things. These lights cost $1,400. You put them on existing posts. They're run by solar light, so don't have to any hookup or anything, although they can be hooked up with 110. I should also preface this, I don't own any stock in any of this equipment. Anyway, I think it's a great idea because of, again, my experience at doing wine tasting down in California. Thanks.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? I got some stuff I can leave too if you're interested.
I'll just say they're very effective. The city of Florence uses them, and also in Washington State, they're almost everywhere in very similar conditions and roads where they curve. And the gentleman earlier talking about from Estacada, those tight turns where it's dark, they're fantastic and they really do work. Our staff have looked into that, and it's a matter of resources, and I think they give us some different cost. But ideally, they're hardwired in versus solar, because I guess some jurisdictions have the sign stolen because they like the battery packs, and so they steal so the one when they're wired in is less likely that they'll steal a simple LED sign. So
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting too is they even can, their light intensity is based on the ambient light. So at night, they're not as bright as during the daytime. And so I'm just kind of enthralled with this. It looks like it works.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Frank Jasinski, and I own the property on both of the south sides of this intersection. The wife's family has been out there 62 years. So we've seen every accident that's happened out there. And there's been at least one death that I know of, and 2 of our family members have been injured. And what they're proposing now is really not going to make that much safer. All they've done is lower that intersection. There's no proposal for lights, no proposal for rumble strips or anything like that. It's and I think this is pretty far along. We've gotten a proposal from the county as far as getting the property. And so that's all I have to say. It's just they need to revisit this a little bit and see if what they proposed is the best way to make it safer.
Well, we'll have to see if a contract's gone out or not. I don't know. One thing I'll tell you that like I said, I drive this 2-3 times a day.
I think you just live right below us.
Yeah, I live next to New Era Church, so When I drive by there, I have almost been hit by a person stopped who didn't look right. Instead, they looked straight or left, and they almost hit me. That, and most of the accidents now appear to take place at night, because I see fire trucks up there all the time from my back deck. And those reflectors are everywhere. But, you know, when I drive down that hill at night, coming from Ken's house,
Or
that's
when I'm
a
coming
big
from my house
steep hill.
going to his,
Big steep hill, and I slow way down, turn my brights on, and hope that the guy on the left comes out. He
Right,
looks,
that he stops at the sign.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. I think what they tried to do is they realign the roads at 90 degrees.
yeah,
It helps a little bit with your blind spot, but it's not going to keep the people from running through that stop street.
yeah. All right, well, we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
I had Cy and Eddie next. Yeah, you give it to Mary there.
what's your opinion of the traffic circle idea?
It would be difficult on the hill, but it would slow them down.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Oh, you want your picture back?
Well, that's the only picture I have. If you guys want
You know what, I'll go ahead and take that, we'll get it back to you.
All right, Cy and Eddie, go ahead.
Yeah. So my name's Eddie Schufelt. I live right on, when you go down that hill on the left, that's my house right there. I stand in my kitchen window and I look down at that intersection. And I've lived there for 10 years, so I'm the newcomer relative to everybody else. So I'm here with all my neighbors, and, you know, we're property owners around that corner, and we want to share our thoughts about the safety improvement. The first time I saw the design of the intersection was when the property acquisition team member came to review the project and that property acquisition process, and it is very far along. So I'm late signing, and I think some people might even be past the deadline. My response when I looked over the design was disappointment over the level of safety improvement. I finally accepted it was better than nothing and signed the right-of-way agreement. But at Burl's Christmas party, which you should get invited to, it's
I
very
tried
fun.
to come, but my wife was sick.
A few of us discussed it, and we all, you know, really pretty much agreed it wasn't going to make much difference for safety. So a few days ago, Paul Staley from the dairy came over and asked what I thought again, and I'd kind of really given up. And I told him I didn't think it was going to prevent the accidents people hoped it would. He agreed and felt so strongly about it. He said he'd consider donating the land to do something better like a roundabout. So we decided to get together and meet. So we met a couple days ago and decided to come here and just share what we thought. I want to apologize to the engineering department. I know they're going to hate this late request. I'm a retired engineer and a project manager, and I hated it when my program got redirected by senior management. I know they won't respond positively at this point, and I usually didn't either. So, but I am.
Can you speak up, sir, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. I don't think they did anything wrong. They took the information they had and they applied the constraints they had, came up with the best design they could. And I'm sure it complies with minimum design standards. The two main problems with that, though, minor difference in traffic behavior and timing can make a big difference in what result you get with minimum standards. It meets due diligence and somewhat indemnifies the county, but it can leave the citizens at high risk. The other problem is it's hard to get good information about specific or unique situations from the crash statistics. I pulled the state crash data for the 10 years from 2009 to 2018 and found 33 accidents tied to this intersection. The one on May 10th, 2017 is a lot I know about because I was in it. The state database only had the demographic info and the location. It didn't give enough information to determine the specific cause and thus the design change that you'd have to make to have prevented it. I've lived on that corner for 10 years, and my kitchen window looks right out over it. I used to be on a volunteer ambulance team and had some training. So I'd go down when I heard a crash. I've helped keep a carload of teenage kids calm out in the dairy field while we waited for the paramedics.
Go ahead.
I use the rest of my time for him to finish.
I've been on the phone with 911 explaining that one passenger was unresponsive and I couldn't get a pulse. In my accident, a lift taxi ran the stop sign and I hit it right in the passenger door at 40 miles an hour. There was a teenage girl in that seat and I could have killed her, which is what happened to that other passenger. If I'd have been a second sooner, he'd have hit me in the door. And I didn't have side airbags, and he did. In 2010, 2 cars with 13 people were injured in a collision. 11 of them were under 18 years old. None of these accidents would have been prevented by the proposed design. They were either from running the stop sign or losing control coming down New Era Road too fast. Right now, what they've done is they've squared up the intersection to improve the sight lines. I don't go down anymore unless the crash is at night, and it might be a while before a car comes along. I can't do it anymore. I don't know how the fire department handles it, and he's a fireman, so he knows. Everyone around here has similar stories. Paul was out in the field with me in the dark with the teenagers. The design challenge you have is you have to understand what types of accidents happen and what changes would eliminate that specific type. I used to manage the quality department for Xerox in Wilsonville, and our job was to predict and quantify the frequency of failure for each failure mode and then evaluate the rate of improvement for design changes. This is exactly the same issue we face here. At this intersection, there are 4 main types of accidents: cars stopping and pulling across without time to clear the lane, cars running the stop sign, cars running off the road when they turn, and cars coming down New Era at a high speed and losing control. The engineering department correctly identified the first as the most common, and I assume that because that's what the design addresses fundamentally. The change will help but not reduce accidents as much as you might expect. The line of sight distance matters a lot, but so does the ability to estimate speed. I spent a half an hour yesterday morning watching the intersection. It takes about 3 seconds from starting to move to clear the far lane. It takes a car a football field away 3.4 seconds to reach the intersection. Look the wrong way first and you have no time to get clear of the car if it's speeding. The intersection at Haynes Road in 99 is a good illustration. There are no line of sight restrictions and there are still a lot of accidents, and those are all due to inability to estimate the oncoming speed. It's also another bad intersection. The design improves only the first issue, but the second is the one that leads to the most serious accidents. The property owners are under a time constraint to sign the property acquisition agreements before the legal process starts. I mean, the project is well underway. I'm sorry we're coming to you this so late in the process, but there was never an opportunity to comment, and now you are the only ones with the authority to step back and review the plan to determine if meeting minimum standards is enough or whether this is a situation where minimum isn't sufficient. We're asking you to delay the project while you do a review. Find out the projected safety improvement and decide if it's sufficient. If it's not, please give the engineering team permission to go beyond minimum. We're only going to get one chance to do this project in any of our lifetimes, and we should do it right. And we're happy to meet with you anytime you choose anybody you would like us to meet with to talk about it.
All right, thank you.
And I'm the other property owner, so all 4 corners are here.
Okay.
And we're all willing to work with the county.
So we'll find out where we're at on this, whether the contract's been let. But you could do the project and then put stoplights in it too, or flashing red lights, or stops, 4-way stops, or anything else.
Yep. It just, as it is now, it's not going to accomplish
I don't
what
disagree.
anybody wants.
Can I ask you just one question, and that is, have you, those of you that live there a long time, have you seen an increase in the accidents over a period of time versus 10 years ago?
Just the same with
Same rate?
population growth.
Yeah, because we have other hot spots in the county where people come to us about situations around other rural roads, and some areas are seeing some spikes because of the traffic on them.
So Central Point has increased 50% from 2015 to 2018. New Era has increased 40% from
Increase in traffic flow or accidents?
traffic flow. Yeah. And it's going to absolutely correlate. But there's also a lot more truck traffic. I don't know if it's Canby development or what, but I get a lot of big trucks coming down New Era now where I didn't. And I saw 5 school buses go through that intersection this morning. So it's...
Yeah, I don't know how they make it around that corner, but they do.
Well, they don't. I think they go down past your house. It's a bypass. That's...
Yeah. All right, we'll take a look. Thank you. Les Poole.
Well, good evening. Probably wonder what I'm going to talk about this evening. A couple of subjects. One of them we just witnessed, and that's citizen involvement, citizen awareness. I come here almost every week. My name's Les Poole. I come here on my own time, and I talk about the things that we're hearing about more and more every day. And here the theme again is traffic safety, and the increase in traffic that's coming with growth, coming with the fact that it's getting too expensive to live in town and more people are moving to Malala and elsewhere so they can have a little bit of a yard. There is so much traffic rolling down South End Road and out of Oregon City that it's really stunning. And that's where the growth's coming. So I appreciate Commissioner Savis's comment about hotspots. We have many. And transportation, material handling and logistics, land use, that's my background. That's why you hear me talk about it over and over. I am a chief petitioner for IP10. Our goal is to get the tolling concept before the voters. Can you imagine what the traffic's going to be like if they start charging us to use I-205 and not expand it? 99 is just going to be horrible. And I don't know what they're going to do at the end of that little Oregon City bridge, but the answer is nothing. What can they do? So transportation is a real big issue, as is citizen involvement and awareness. There was a big transportation decision made last year, and I'm hearing a lot of feedback about it, and that's the establishment of a vehicle registration fee in the county. There was never a public discussion item of it. There's very little citizen awareness, and that's troubling. Recently, we had another situation, and that's where after the bills were paid, our chair, we had a vote, our chair who had violated ethics laws was reimbursed for $26,000. Now, obviously, since that time, he has paid the amount. But I encourage folks to watch the last few weeks' meetings and to read the articles in the Oregonians because it's very troubling. It really is. And we come to you, these folks are here tonight, and you bet you have to raise yourself to a level that the chair has not raised himself to. So I'm very pleased we're having an evening meeting with a robust turnout. I hope we have more citizen involvement. Don't you folks, whether you agree with what I say or not, don't you think we could have one evening meeting a month in this county? You know, the evening meeting, one evening meeting a month so folks can be here. You're already having a meeting on Thursday. If you flip it to Thursday night, I won't have to go start a petition and wonder how many signatures it'll take to where we have one evening meeting a month. So this is great that the folks have an opportunity to be here, and let's make that what it used to be. It's a real simple request, so let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have, Gary, what is up next?
Commissioners, you have a public discussion item with a resolution affirming Clackamas County's support of pollinators. Commissioner Schrader and I will be your presenters this evening. I'll kick it off, Commissioner Schrader, if you don't mind. So this is an item Commissioner Schrader has brought before the commission to have the commission approve a formal resolution detailing the imperative role pollinators play in the health of county forests and animal habitat, as well as agriculture and other industries. We have a video we'd like to start with by showing you first. This is a video that is an excerpt from Oregon Public Broadcasting Field Guide that aired last year. It's just a few short minutes, so if you'll please draw your attention to the screen.
The European honeybee might get all the attention, but a true bee connoisseur will point you to the native species. From fuzzy bumblebees to glistening sweat bees and stately longhorns, native bees are wild critters of almost endless variety.
Here we go.
They possess the kind of charm that attracts amateur insect lovers like wasps at a picnic.
Oh, here's a good one.
But these aren't just any biophytes. led by Master Gardener Michael O'Loughlin. They're on a statewide mission.
Our effort is to go around and to sample all the bees we can and figure out what species are in Yamhill County, and there's other groups throughout the state that are doing the other counties.
You heard that right. They are trying to survey every bee species in Oregon for the very first time. Experts believe around 500 species might live in the state, but no one actually knows for sure, which is a problem because we could be losing them at an alarming rate.
Over the weekend, dead bumblebees started falling from these trees until eventually shoppers reported it to the various stores.
In 2013, a massive bee kill in Wilsonville, Oregon made national news. Upwards of 50,000 bumblebees died from exposure to an over-the-counter insecticide called Safari. A novice landscaper had applied it to the blooming linden trees, not knowing the havoc it would wreak. Or as one bee expert told KGW,
I've never seen any sort of a die-off of bumblebees on this scale.
but why was the die-off such a big deal? Well, alongside honeybees, bumblebees and other native bees are essential to the pollination of many of the crops that make up Oregon's $6 billion agricultural industry. So in 2014, the state legislature passed a bill that declared a pollinator emergency.
We became the only state in the whole country that has a funded mandate to put together a strategic health plan for pollinators.
Sarah Kincaid is an entomologist with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. To fulfill the mandate, her department teamed up with other state agencies in 2017 to create the Oregon Bee Project. Sarah says the Bee Project's mission is to expand our understanding of Oregon's bees, to increase their habitat, and to protect them from pesticide exposure and disease.
Our long-term goal is really to assess whether or not bee species here in Oregon are declining or whether or not they're stable.
To do that, first we need to figure out exactly what species call Oregon home, something the state has never had the resources to do. So the Oregon Bee Project turned to volunteers. Now anyone can sign up with a local team as part of what organizers are calling the Oregon Bee Atlas.
Thanks to Oregon State University Extension Office for providing us that video. We have two invited speakers who would quickly like to share more updates on pollination and pollinators in Clackamas County. I'll invite them to come to the testimony table here. Antony Melathopoulos, who is Pollinator Health Extension Specialist at Oregon State University, and Carol Yamada, Stafford Hamlet resident. So please go ahead.
So,
Want to go first, Carol? Okay.
all these two people. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here on the occasion of this resolution. I've been asked to speak a little bit about the importance of pollinators here in Clackamas County, and there's a number of crops in the county that are dependent on pollinators. The vegetable seeds, red radish, the clover seed industry centered in the county, of course, the largest being blueberry, and also the caneberries, and strawberries. All of these crops require bee pollination, and the thing that's really unique, I think we've heard about honeybee colonies being trucked around the United States. That's not the case in Oregon. Our beekeepers leave the state just now. They've headed to California to do almond pollination, but they're going to be in the state for the rest of the year doing pollination all the way from Hermiston into this county, across the Cascades into Madras. The other reason that bees are so important, as you saw in that video, is Oregonians are very proud of our natural environment, and we have this rich endowment of bees, that we have more bee species in Oregon than all the states east of the Mississippi. And people really love that. When we've talked to people around the state, they're so surprised that we have these bees and they want to learn more about them. They're hungry for information. The last thing that I was going to say is that the video started with an incident that was here in the county, and I'm really amazed at how much work has been done, both here at the county, but also at the state level, in kind of taking that tragedy and turning it into something extremely positive. We have the strongest pollinator education program anywhere in the United States here in Oregon. We train thousands of pesticide applicators on how to use products correctly so that they can get their work done. There's very good cooperation between the beekeepers and various land managers. And as you saw in that video, we've got one of the most robust survey programs for native bees anywhere in the U.S. So lots is going right, and I really commend the counselors. Oh, and the last thing I was going to say is you can see that box right there by Commissioner Schrader. There's also a lot of people who are keeping these native bees in their backyards. We have about a quarter of the species will nest in these little holes, and it's a real pleasure for people around the county to be able to watch these bees up close with their kids.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Yamada. I live in the Stafford hamlet, and we border 3 bee cities. Bees are really big where I live. I started my pollinator garden just a year ago. It was kind of in response to like, oh, climate change is real. What can I do? So I decided instead of planting vegetables, I would plant flowers, but I didn't know anything about bees or flowers. So I went online and did a lot of research, and I realized how much I didn't know about bees. I thought all bees made honey, and I thought all bees lived in hives, but actually almost none of them do. And so I got this bee suit, and I went around, and I decided I would tell everybody that would listen to me that, wow, you really got to take care of your bees. You have to understand their life cycle and garden appropriately, accordingly to their life cycle. Because although bees in ag areas are really important, they have done studies that show that in the areas where we live, in the suburban areas, there's actually more pollinators and more varieties of pollinators because we don't use as much poisons, and we have more variety of flowers, and we're living in the areas that bees would naturally live in. So there's a lot we can do to help bees, and in my garden, in 1 year, I had so many bees, and they were so lovely, and I'm hoping that they come back again. So I'm really excited that you guys are doing this pollinator initiative. Going forward, if we do have severe climate change, we're going to have to be really nimble so that we can protect our pollinators and pay attention to what's going on. And the culture that you are creating by making everybody in the county bee aware is fantastic. And so I'm really thankful that Martha Schrader has gone through and made this happen. I know she's been working on it a year, and I thank you guys all for supporting it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have 2 other folks. The chair kindly gave me 2 names to call up who came here specifically. Thank you for coming. And Anthony and I studied the same genus of bees we found out tonight when we talked. But I'll go into that a little bit later. So we have Fred Weiler and Jackie Hammond are here tonight. Is Jackie here? There she is. Okay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me a few moments to address the commission. My name is Fred Weiler. I'm a husband, a father, an educator, and farmer. We have a small family farm in Estacada where we grow pastured pork and poultry to sell at farmers markets. I am happy to see your resolution in support of pollinators. By the language used in your resolution, it is obvious this body understands the impacts of climate change and your responsibility in being a part of the transition from fossil fuels. It is also apparent from the resolution you believe in science and are working to protect our citizens and environment. This resolution is a great starting point to that end. I trust when the county comes up with its climate action plan, solid protections will be put in place to not only recognize the importance of pollinators, but also do something to protect them. While butterfly gardens are helpful, they do nothing to protect the pollinators we so desperately need for so many of our crops. This resolution recognizes the decline of honeybees worldwide, and scientists believe glyphosate are linked to the decline. Glyphosate are the most common herbicide used in the world to control broadleaves and unwanted grasses, the most common of these being Roundup. There are over 750 different glyphosate-containing products sold in the United States alone. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer has called glyphosate a probable human carcinogen. Evidence is mounting that people who are heavily exposed to glyphosate, such as landscapers, tree farm and nursery workers, and farmers, have an increased risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Glyphosate are just one of the hundreds of chemicals sprayed on our forests, fields, crops, lawns, and schoolyards. Not only do these chemicals hurt our pollinators, the unwanted overspray and drift contaminate neighboring properties, streams, gardens, playgrounds, pastures, and parks. If we are to protect our pollinators, it only makes sense we also protect ourselves and our food sources from the same chemicals that are killing our pollinators. On our farm, we use organic practices. We believe soil health and regenerative farming is our most important duty. We don't feed our animals GMO grains. Instead, we rotationally graze our animals on pasture and woodlot. Our goal is to leave as little negative impact as possible by doing our best to sequester carbon through minimal tilling and rotational grazing, as well as leaving select stands of timber. We do our best to protect our mason bee and native bumblebees, as well as our own honeybees, by not spraying anything. Ending the use of glyphosates may be the only thing we can do to truly protect these as well as other pollinators. Our climate is changing at a rapid rate. I recently read an article talking about the acidification of the Pacific Ocean affecting the reproduction, organ development, and shell strength of Dungeness crab on the Oregon coast. Scientists say this is happening decades earlier than expected. Wildfires, drought, habitat loss, deforestation, and greed are all hastening the effects of climate change. Just last week, President Trump addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and called the scientific community, along with environmentalists, prophets of doom. I ask you to take strong action so this message is not a prophecy of doom, but an opportunity to create a sustainable future. You are uniquely positioned to create a climate action plan that is good for not only the environment, but also the economy, one that can be an example to the rest of our state. I ask you as a commission to ask yourself one simple question when any policy or action is to be considered. Is it good for the planet? I would like to ask you a question before I go. How do you want to be remembered? Will you leave a legacy of nice words or meaningful action? Thank you for your time and for your recognition of the importance of pollinators.
Thank you.
Jackie.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jackie Hammond-Williams. I'm a resident of Clackamas County and a 12-year manager of the Oregon City Farmers Market. I'm here to applaud you with your resolution for support of pollinators. I'm urging you to go further. I would love to see you ban neonicotinoids and glyphosate in Clackamas County. I don't know if our road crews are using it in the county, but pollinators do not need to be drenched in chemicals. We have a lot of specialty crops. I'm here, in support of farmers. The small farmers in Clackamas County grow specialty crops. Most of those are open pollinated. They need pollinators. So you're supporting pollinators, and pollinators in return support our crops. I really hope that, as I say, you'll go a little bit further in the resolution. This is a great start, but I would really like to see some firm action. And maybe if the county can ban these chemicals, then cities will follow and we'll gradually get a clean county. And, we have so many pollinators that need our help with climate change and the dousing of chemicals. They're not thriving. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. To say a few words to that, one of the reasons I brought this forward, I don't know if many people know, I'm actually a trained entomologist. And when I met Anthony from Oregon State Extension, we realized we actually worked on the same genus of bees, actually, at one time. And I did actually start my career working out for the Department of Agriculture here in Oregon as a young entomologist. And so it's a long story how I got here, but I've never forgotten my roots. And my bees were blueberry pollinators, and one of the things I want to stress to people is that without these creatures, we would have a potential collapse of a food shed here. They pollinate major crops in our county, including blueberries, clover seeds, vegetable seeds, blueberries, pears, cherries. And so without these native populations, we would have some difficulty actually kind of growing our food. And the thing that people need to understand is when you're native, we have honeybees. They're not native. They are not native to American soil. They were brought over from Europe. But native bees are endemic. They live here. They've evolved here. So oftentimes, they can go out and do their work at far lower temperatures in the field for pollination purposes. So that's why I brought my bee box with me. This is a mason bee box. And we also call them blue orchard bees, and the technical name is Osmia lignaria. And essentially, you can actually have these creatures in your backyard. You can order bee boxes online, and you can also order those little tiny pupae that you take. You put them in here, and you keep this open. But you have to get them really in February and March. This is the other thing. These are very, very early spring bees. Put the pupae in there, they will emerge, they will start pollinating, and they will actually get a whole nother generation of these very important pollinators going for the next route. So I'm encouraging people to look into this, and please know that there's lots of different literature out on the table outside, as well as pollinator seeds. So if you're a gardener and you are interested in this, I would suggest you take a look at that. And also, this is a little postcard I hope you can all get. It's Bees of Oregon. And on the back, it talks about the Oregon Bee Project. Anthony was correct. We are actually one of the top states in terms of educating and really doing the research and promoting wild and managed bees through education and pollinator-friendly practices and research. So I want to thank my colleagues for indulging me in my going back to my entomology roots, and then I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation. Okay. Whereas pollinators include animals such as bees and other insects, birds, and bats that transfer pollen from flower to flower, resulting in the fertilization and subsequent seed and fruit production for plants. And whereas pollinators play a vital role in the health of our forests and grasslands, which provide forage, fish, and wildlife habitat, timber, water, mineral resources, and recreational opportunities, as well as enhanced economic development and tourism opportunities for communities. And whereas 3/4 of the Earth's flowering plants and 35% of the world's food crops depend on animal pollination to reproduce, and over 150 food crops in the United States depend on pollinators, including nearly all fruit and grain crops. And whereas the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has reported that between 235 billion and 577 billion worth of annual global food production relies on direct contributions by pollinators. And whereas the agricultural industry in Clackamas County is a critical part of our local economy, and together with the nurseries, greenhouses, and food production industries, generates a localized gross product of more than 277 million. And whereas the world is facing a climate change crisis brought on by the rise of carbon dioxide levels, and Clackamas County is developing a climate action plan that will state our intended actions to reduce our carbon footprint. And whereas populations of important pollinators include bees, they're declining at alarming levels, and climate change and habitat loss are contributing to pollinators' increasing vulnerability. Whereas Clackamas County has a strategic priority to honor, utilize, promote, and invest in our natural resources. Now, therefore, the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners resolves as follows. Where and whenever appropriate, Clackamas County will take steps to install and maintain pollinator gardens and pursue other actions on its lands and infrastructure to improve these animals' ability to survive, flourish, and thrive. Where and whenever appropriate, Clackamas County will take steps to install, promote, and maintain the use of mason bee boxes and other similar items and natural features that promote healthy pollinator activity and habitat. County departments will adopt integrated measures within their operating policies and practices to better reflect the absolute importance of pollinators and to minimize the impact of any actions that could hurt pollinator populations. The county will promote to our community the importance of pollinators and the actions that Clackamas County is taking to help them thrive, as well as actions our residents and stakeholders can take to do the same. The county's forthcoming climate action plan will include adaptation actions and best practices that can help pollinators in our community continue to persist, with further recommended actions on how our body can help them. The county and its departments will annually recognize and promote National Pollinator Week and other related celebrations as appropriate, dated this 30th day of January 2020. And as far as how we manage our lands here, we are really taking a look at our integrated pest management policies, so we can make sure that when we're using materials, we are doing them safely and appropriately in a way that doesn't harm pollinators. One of my jobs as an entomologist was to really study integrated pest management, and I want to thank Gary Schmidt, our administrator, and my colleagues for allowing us to take a look at this a little more thoroughly so we can really be appropriate with anything that we use. So I think we're on a good path, and I thank you all for being a captive audience here tonight for this. And I would encourage you to take all of this information home with you and volunteer with OSU, Oregon State University, with the Bees of Oregon, and become a part of the group that helps identify all the native species of bees that we have here in our state. So with that, colleagues, I'm done. So.
Does any commissioner have any clarifying questions of Martha or the rest of the audience?
No.
No? Well, then I'd ask for a motion to approve this item.
I move to approve this resolution.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we approve a resolution affirming Clackamas County's support of pollinators. Any further discussion? Yes, Paul?
So I just want to say one thing. This obviously created quite a buzz, and I understand there's a lot. I understand there's a lot of people in the audience here that operate Airbnbs.
There you go. Well, who I would encourage to have pollinator gardens on your property if you can do that. Okay.
You just had to bug us with that, didn't you?
Oh, gee.
No, let's stop right now. With that, I still have to call for all those in favor. Say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no opposition. Motion carries. So we want to take a picture.
Yes.
But Mary, let's take a picture with us standing over there so it looks like all these people came here for this one item tonight.
Even though we know better.
Yeah, that's good.
So Mary, take a picture from over here, or over here, and we'll stand there. We need you in the bee outfit. So we're just going to face that way. Face the camera.
I did, absolutely.
you very much. Thanks for coming.
Okay. Well, Gary, I think there's something else on the agenda tonight. What might that be?
Yes, Chair, you have a public hearing, the first reading of an ordinance adding Clackamas County Code, Chapter 8.10, short-term rentals to the Clackamas County Code, and amending Clackamas County Code, Chapter 2.07, compliance hearings officer. Nate Boderman and Martha Fritzy will present.
There's a PowerPoint? There's a
PowerPoint?
PowerPoint?
Yeah, can you start talking while I do this? Because I got to bring the screen back down.
Okay. I don't know what to do without my PowerPoint. I am going to run through a very, very brief PowerPoint presentation about why we're here, how we got here, and then we are going to, I believe, just open it up for public testimony. So, as was mentioned, this is the first ordinance reading for a short-term rental registration program into the county code. Very quickly, the definition of a short-term rental or vacation rental is a dwelling unit or a portion of a dwelling unit that's rented to any person or entity for a period of up to 30 consecutive nights. We often refer to them as Airbnbs. But there's no way I could follow that joke, actually. But Vacasa rents them, VRBOs. You can find them on online platforms. There's also a lot of management companies out there who manage rentals like this. And so the very first question we ask ourselves is, why are we doing this, and why are we doing this right now? There's a number of reasons we're doing this. The three primary reasons are listed up here. First and foremost, I'm a planner, and our zoning and development ordinance, our zoning code, really is silent about short-term rentals. It doesn't specifically allow short-term rentals in homes. And so from a zoning perspective, short-term rentals are prohibited. We are well aware that there are hundreds of them out there, and interest is certainly growing every day to do this. And so we would like some clarity in where and how these are allowed. There also, over the last several years, have been several complaints about short-term rentals operating in the county. And potential neighborhood impacts. We've heard from other jurisdictions that there are certainly potential neighborhood impacts from short-term rentals. And many short-term rental owners are not paying their required transient room tax, which is a separate program that we're not really talking about today, but they're tied together. All hotels, motels, lodging establishments are supposed to be paying a transient room tax to the county. And so how we got here, it's been a little bit over a year. We, in our planning staff, started some research and looked into what other jurisdictions were doing, how they handled this topic. We embarked on a fairly large public outreach effort in the spring of 2019 into early summer, a number of community meetings. We've had a website up. We had an initial survey about opinions about regulating short-term rentals and certain particular things that we might want to regulate. We've had 6 policy sessions with you all, and at least one, maybe 2 work sessions with our planning commission. We have posted and discussed 3 different drafts of regulations, the latest of which we opened up for a public comment period in December into the beginning of January. Also included a survey with that. And it's all culminating into today, where we are going through some public hearings to potentially adopt the regulations into the and program into the county code. The proposed regulations as they are currently would allow short-term rentals in any legal dwelling in unincorporated Clackamas County. If the dwelling is within the Portland metropolitan urban growth boundary, the short-term rental must be within the primary residence, within the person's primary residence, or on the same property as the person's primary residence. The proposed program would include a 2-year registration that would be administered through the finance department, which is the same department who administers the transient room tax. Enforcement is a combination of a number of different departments. Code enforcement would certainly be involved. The sheriff's office is involved in things that the sheriff's office has the authority to enforce currently, which is noise, parking and right-of-way, obviously criminal issues. Some of the specific requirements, and I'm not going to read through every single one of these. There is a maximum overnight occupancy, and I added a little bit of clarification here because I think this has caused, based on some of the feedback, it's caused maybe a little bit of confusion. The maximum overnight occupancy, the way it's written currently, is 2 people per bedroom or sleeping area plus 2 extra, with a maximum of 15. That doesn't mean every house gets a maximum of 15. That just means if you have 7 bedrooms, you would do the math, you would end up with 16 people. You don't get 16 people, you get 15. So if you have 7 or more bedrooms, 15 is the max. If you have 2 bedrooms, you get 4 people for your bedrooms plus 2 extra, that's 6. And so it's a maximum overnight occupancy calculation based on your bedrooms or sleeping areas that you have. There's a requirement for at least 1 off-street parking space, and then after that, 1 space per 2 sleeping areas. There are some building, life, and fire safety requirements. Those are verified through a self-inspection affidavit. There's a requirement to post a notice inside the short-term rental with the registration number, the maximum occupancy, and emergency contact information. Notice will be mailed to neighbors, also with contact information. And like anybody else, anyone in the residence would need to comply with any of the noise ordinance requirement, the county noise ordinance requirement. Those would be posted inside the short-term rental also. Some other things, you would need to register and pay your transient lodging taxes, maintain garbage removal. There are other requirements like proof of insurance in order to qualify for the registration. Enforcement, I'm going to circle back to a little bit. Like I said, enforcement is a bit of a combination of different folks who would get involved in this. The finance department, who's administering the program, would enforce things like failing to register, failing to pay. If it just simply couldn't be resolved and became a violation, it may become a code enforcement department issue. Any building safety, land use violations would be under the purview of code enforcement. And then specific code violations, noise, criminal behavior would be through the sheriff's office. The way that this program is written is that notice would be sent to neighbors. The hope is that there will be a first point of contact by the neighbor, and there may even be some information available on a website. If there is a complaint, there would be a person to call before calling the sheriff or code enforcement, unless, of course, it needs a call to the sheriff. We would highly recommend people call the sheriff. This program is written as a full cost recovery program. No additional cuts or general fund monies would be going into this program. This requires a registration fee. Using the best data we have, we've calculated this fee at this point to be $800 to $900 for a 2-year registration. Those fees will go to cover 2 new full-time employees, 1 in finance to administer the program, and a new code enforcement officer. And the assumptions, other assumptions we made in that calculation are listed up there. This is a fee. This is to actually cover all the costs of the program. The transient room tax, of course, would still have to be paid. That's the tax that gets used toward tourism-type activities. So staff's recommendation here is to hold this public hearing this evening, schedule a second reading and a public hearing. Currently, we have a date of February 13th scheduled for that, and direct staff to draft a resolution establishing a registration fee and fine amounts for noncompliance with program requirements. Nate Boderman can get into that process a little bit more if you have questions about it, because that's outside of my arena. And I'm going to leave you with this really, really neat graphic. I love this graphic, and we're going to thank Cheryl Bell for that. This illustrates the program. And somebody told me, well, it illustrates how complicated it is. I actually think it illustrates it, it simplifies it for me. And it basically shows you the process that you go through if you want to run a short-term rental. You first register. There's a list of things you are required to submit, the fee, some general information, your affidavit. And then it goes into specific areas if you, on the frowny face on the bottom, if you are not compliant, and the various entities that you would be dealing with for enforcement. I just put that up there because I like it, but I also think that there may be questions that we can sort of point to and speak to later today if you want to go back to this. I can either leave it up or I can finish with questions.
Well, first off, I have a question on what is incidental. So I've had some people talk to me about their concerns that they have a room they rent out occasionally to people to supplement their income, and that is an incidental use. And my understanding is that does not require a registration or TRT tax. Can you
Handing that one
explain
off
that?
to Nate.
Yeah, so we were tasked with obviously trying to distinguish between, trying to create a definition for what is an incidental use. The best we could come up with, at least based on the information we had, was reference to those that advertise or that commercially make their properties available, right? And for those of us that don't necessarily have these, it made sense to us, at least it was intuitive, that if you were only renting out or making your property available for those that you were related to, that you had a relationship with, you'd probably do that more informally. If you're using this as a revenue generation scheme, I guess you could say, then you would probably be advertising it, whether that be on Airbnb, VRBO, all the platforms that Martha referred to. And so that was the distinguishing threshold, I guess, between what was incidental. Again, that's based on the best thing that we could come up with. We're certainly open. But again, a lot of thought went into that.
So it's unlikely that you may have one extra bedroom in your house. You're saying that you would not have that on Airbnb. You'd maybe have it as in the newspaper looking for a roommate kind of thing, and it's probably over 30 days, or I don't see the difference. You said it'd have to be like a relative. You mentioned maybe a relative or a friend or family, but you may want a roommate that, but
right, that's a whole other category of use, right? We're talking short-term rentals. These are more akin to short-term stays that, nothing like a longer term, over 1 month in duration, tenancy. Again, that's governed by a whole other set of rules and regulations, really at the state level. And so again, these are short-term, under 30-day, limited duration stays.
Well, if somebody's here tonight who does something like that, I hope you'll mention it or ask, give me an example.
Sure.
This was at some other meeting. Somebody walked up to me and was concerned. The other thing I noticed that it's 50. I don't remember if I read a bunch of different codes today, other cities and states and stuff, and if it's less than $15.01, I don't know if that was our code, then a day, then it's not a short-term rental. Obviously, the tax on $15.01 would not be much, but it's some money in a month that somebody may use to supplement their income. I'm still a little bit confused on that, so hopefully somebody in the audience could help describe that. So, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, but first, I want to acknowledge the hard work the staff have done up to this point. You've had a very difficult job to balance between people who don't want any rules and regulations at all and people who would like to see everything prohibited no matter what. And obviously the extremes are probably not where we can land given all of the issues that we're dealing with. So I want to commend you on the work that you've done so far. I will say, I'm not there yet, because I do have some concerns that I'm not sure we've addressed adequately enough yet. One of my questions is, so we're going to be licensing people to do this service. Does that in effect prohibit people who do not have licenses from doing it? Because it would put the people who have to be licensed at a competitive disadvantage, for one thing, which is not fair. And the other thing is that for all intents and purposes, if I'm licensed to do this work, it seems to me if you want to do it, you get a license too, or what you're doing is illegal. So is that the case under this circumstance? Because I personally am inclined to think it should be.
Yeah, so I guess at the staff level, we had thought that non-compliance or non-registration would be handled through a fine.
Okay.
That's typically, the kind of mechanism that we use for other non-licensures in the county, whether it be dogs, whether it be, I guess we did adult homes at one point. We don't have that in the code anymore, but, that's typically and traditionally how we've handled it.
So for all intents and purposes, it would in effect be illegal, and there would be a fine if you were doing it without a license.
And we found out.
And we found, of course, I get that. I had a question about why no guest houses.
Actually, that's in state code. I found that out.
Is that the case?
State code doesn't allow renting your guest house out.
That wasn't my understanding of state code, and we can certainly take a look at it. When we originally started going through this project and drafting the regulations, we looked at where it could potentially be allowed, and currently in our zoning and development code, if you are zoned appropriately to have a guest house, they're only allowed in certain zones, and there are very strict parameters about guest houses. One of them is that guest houses shall not be used as a source of rental income, and so we did not include them. It would require a zoning code amendment. My understanding, and we could, maybe Jennifer Hughes can correct me, I don't know, but my understanding is that those provisions have been in our zoning code for at least 4 decades, and that there is not a requirement under state law that we have it and that we could change it. But it seems to me that you've heard something different.
So if a person has a guest house and they are actually using it as an Airbnb and charging for it, are they legal or illegal?
They are not legal right now.
They are not legal.
Right.
Okay, well, because I was contacted by someone that had this concern, so I'm hoping they're listening under the circumstances. I want to be sure that I understood correctly that neighbors will have the phone number and contact information for either the property owner and/or the manager of the property?
Yes, as part of the registration process, notice would be sent out to neighbors with that contact information. It could be that there is a website available where you can find that information as well. We need to talk with our tech folks as we move forward with this.
I just want to make sure that we do something like that, because I don't want to get any more 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls because of problems. I prefer that the owner or the manager get the phone call, at least the first one. Let me see, what else? I have a couple other questions here. We have not adopted penalties yet for violations, but I have the same feeling about some other penalties that we have for code violations that are extraordinarily low and essentially become the cost of doing business of somebody who wants to have a party, and it costs them less than a fine than a keg of beer. So I would encourage you to make sure that if people are going to violate, that the penalty hurts, quite frankly. And then a record of violations be kept, that at a certain point in time, if there's a sufficient number of violations, I'm not going to be specific as to how many at this point in time, but when there's a certain number of violations, that licenses be forfeit.
So you're talking about for a specific property, keeping
for a
record
specific
of
property,
the number
yes.
of, they'd have to be verified violations. It couldn't be based on
Absolutely.
complaints.
Process, I understand that, it should be the case, but that being the case, then I think that if you're not managing your properties appropriately and you're causing havoc in the neighborhood for your neighbors, there ought to be a consequence for that. And then I hope we take a little more look at the actual enforcement end of it and how we're going to do that, because what's really driven so much of this conversation is the bad actors who allow people to rent their properties who do not behave appropriately, given that they're in a residential neighborhood. So I want to make sure that we have some adequate enforcement provisions above and beyond calling, of course, the owner or the manager of the property. That's probably the biggest concern. And I will drop it there. And again, I thank you for the work you've done. I understand how sticky this is, but clearly, given what's been going on with the advent of online platforms, action does need to be taken. Thank you.
I wanted to declare a potential conflict on this next statement. I think guest houses should be allowed to rent, but I'm thinking about building one, so just in case, there is a potential conflict here. The state of Oregon is looking at changing that rule. One of the rules that former Chair Charlotte Lehan looked at was historic buildings on a property. For example, on mine, I have a 100-year-old building that I want to turn into a guest house. Right now, I can have a farmhand living in there, a family member, something like that, but someday I may not need a farmhand. So I'm interested in looking at that. I agree with the RV thing. Otherwise, we'd have RV parks all over the place. That would be crazy. But just in case that subject comes up, I just want to declare a potential conflict on that. Paul?
Yeah, so we've, as staff indicated, we've had 6 work sessions on this. Feels like more. And there's are members of the audience in here. I do know that actually neighbors of the audience here who actually have had experiences. So doing something is important, and with regard to the nuisance factor, and also the fact that Airbnbs are not permitted currently, that there's another rationale for doing this. So for those basic reasons, I support the effort. But what's come out of this, and I think probably the first one was the first community meeting we had up at Welch's, I believe. And some of the people in the audience I recognize being there. And we had quite a few people there. But what came out of that, and then some of the subsequent community meetings around the county, was that I made this connection that a lot of the complaints were also very similar to long-term rental complaints, right? Where we have, just basically rentals in the county, whether the owners are in the area or whether they're absentee owners, but the rentals are taking place. And if we look at the track record of what a lot of our code enforcement challenges are, and some of them which we land up in executive session having some issues as far as expanding our efforts in the way of enforcement. The long-term rental aspect has really created a lot of havoc, and frankly continues to create a lot of havoc in the county and quality of life when we have a neighbor that's not there for a weekend, but it's there day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and we've got to do something about it. So those are the ones that are probably the most prominent. So I was thinking maybe during this process, and anyone who listened or participated in any of those meetings probably heard me say that whatever the mechanism is, we do the enforcement, because it's regarded nuisance, that it's ideally it touches both. So my question to the staff is, I don't know who's the appropriate person to ask, is that have we logged the number of long-term complaints, long-term rental complaints and or short-term complaints and compared them? Or how significant is our short-term rental nuisance complaints that we're asking code enforcement? I know they're out there because some of the people in the audience have experienced that. So I'm not questioning that, but it just seems that the long-term rental aspect is by far more numerous. Do we have any kind of a record of how many short-term rental nuisance complaints we have on an annual basis? Anyone?
Well, we have no record of long-term rentals. We don't have a business.
We have an experience. We have a log in code enforcement. We have a log of them.
Well, that would be, but we have no record of who's renting their home. I mean, there would be no comparison.
I'm just asking the question because it's part of the why. I guess it gets to the why.
We need to get going, so let's move on shortly here. Sorry, I even asked a
Good
question.
evening, Commissioners. For the record, Cheryl Bell, Assistant Director of Development. We do not log our complaints based off of rental status. The complaints are based off the property owner. We treat everybody fairly, so we just look at the property owner. It's not something that we track.
Cheryl, I can't hear you. Could you
Oh,
get to
sorry.
the microphone, please?
Yeah, so, sorry. We do not track code enforcement complaints based off rental property status.
Yeah. And Cheryl, I know what department you work in. Are you closely tied to code enforcement?
Yes, I am.
By chance? Okay, so, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, is this a public hearing? Let me find my paper.
Yeah.
Where is it? Can I borrow yours?
Sure.
All right. I will open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify on this matter, and we have a list. So Bonnie Robb and Dan Breen. And tell,
Know each other, just to be clear.
just tell us where you're from, basically, and your name.
Jim, remind them to talk into the mic.
Oh, yeah, be sure and talk directly into the mic so other folks
Happy to
can
talk into the mic. Ken, I had no idea I could call you about that terrible Airbnb across the street from me.
Yes, you can.
I'm
His
Bonnie
number's-
Robb. I live at 18782 Benfield Avenue, Lake Oswego, Oregon. I am your unincorporated cousin, and I have, first of all, I support Airbnb. I stay in them. I think they're a great service to a lot of people. My personal experience in my neighborhood, I've been in my house for 19 years. I have the third owner across the street from me who took down walls, removed walls, and built bunk beds. And their first rental was 38 people with two bathrooms. We had a bus pull up, and we're kitty corner to an elementary school. We had people grooming in the front yard. Later that summer, we had construction workers who also camped out in the cul-de-sac and slept in the front yard. We also had, at the start of school, a big party that went on there with grandparents walking their kids to school in front of these guys sitting out there smoking dope and drinking beer. So I think these, and I want to just compliment the staff on your excellent work. I also serve on the Rosewood Neighborhood CPO. That's where I've seen you, Ken and Paul. When this issue first came up with the house across the street, the board attempted to talk with the owner and also actually worked with the county, and they were very helpful. So we just want to, offer gratitude for that. I think this is a really great document. I think it puts some teeth and constraint around what we've seen is kind of a runaway house in our neighborhood. There's another house that has no problems at all. They host neighbor gatherings there. They self-report if there are issues, and they're very compatible. And I actually forwarded that, this information to that particular neighbor, and he said, I'm good with that. So thank you for your hard work and for considering all of us.
Thanks. I want to ask the county a question, though. This isn't a grandfathering issue because they have gone beyond what will be allowed by code. It's not grandfathered that they can have 33 people at this facility. No, I just want to make sure.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that.
All right. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. My name is Dan Breen. I live in Tigard, and I own a vacation house in Welch's. It's part of the Rippling River Association HOA, just down the street from the resort at the mountain. It's a 2-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom with a loft, a TV room, living room, kitchen and dining area, 2-car garage. I've been renting this house as well as using it myself and my family for about 13 years now. And a lot of our rentals are families with children. In fact, multiple families with children. I see that there are 4 adults and 4 children. We have 2 bedrooms. Okay, the ordinance as it's written would say that's too many people. A lot of times when families get together. They could be cousins, relatives, neighbors, friends. Adults sleep in the bedrooms. Kids sleep on the sofa beds. And for kids, that can be a lifetime experience of a bonding experience with cousins. The way this ordinance is written, families like that would have to rent a larger place, more money, possibly price them out of being able to spend a weekend at the mountain. So that's a problem. That's a problem. I think the portion of the ordinance limiting the number of residents should be removed entirely. When I bought this house, part of the justification for buying it was that rental income would help to pay the mortgage. If this goes into effect the way it's written currently, I would have fewer nights rented. I would have less rental income. I don't know if I'd be able to keep the house. I don't know if my family would be able to enjoy it anymore. So I think that portion about maximum occupants should be stricken entirely. So, thank you.
Okay. Are you suggesting per room or the whole facility? I mean, the woman next to you had 33 people in the house next door.
Well, I think there are other issues that could have been addressed other than just how many people that were there.
Okay.
Behavior of people outside, as she described, kids being walked to school, while folks are smoking dope and drinking beer. There are probably some other things that those particular tenants were violating other than just the number of people there. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe this says, Paul.
Just got a quick question for staff. So the building code, there's an occupancy kind of built in our code, so to speak, or not our code, but state code. So could you just speak to that briefly for our edification?
Correct me if I'm wrong, the maximum is 15 people, and then after that, it's no longer considered a single-family dwelling, and that's where the maximum of 15 comes from.
Okay.
So it's state building codes.
Okay, thank you.
But the per room thing is our own.
Yes, that's up to you.
Okay. So I believe this says Mark Skinner and Brett Fisher. Is that Mark? Sound right? Okay, come on up. Thank you for coming tonight. Tell us where you're from and.
First? Sure. Okay, my name is Brett Fisher. Thank you for having this. I wear lots of hats, primarily associated with government camp specifically. I am vice chair of the government camp CPO. I'm on the sanitary district and government camp as well. Professionally, I'm vice president of the Ski Bowl group of companies. And specifically tonight, I'm here to talk about one of our group of companies, which is Mount Hood Management. I was vice president of the development company that built Collins Lake Resort and the Grand Lodges. We have 199 condominiums there. And one of the things that I want to present specifically government camp, and even more specifically Collins Lake Resort and the Grand Lodges there. We originally developed that property as a second home market. It right now would not fit one of the exclusions. Out of 199 condominiums there, we have 2 that are primary residents. The rest are second homes and vacation rentals. Mount Hood Management is an on-site management company, and in addition to that, we manage the homeowners association. So there's a lot of redundancy in the draft as it's written that is actually currently being managed by the homeowners association, specifically parking, trash, noise ordinance. We even have security there that's till the morning hours policing all of that. So we do a lot of this already, and specifically I think my ask would be that we look at particular exclusions. I had a conversation with Martha the other day, whether that's the government camp CPO boundary, as a resort town and community that is primarily developed for the vacationers. We follow all the rules, we pay all the taxes currently, and you know, we've had some experiences in the past that I mean, we're not perfect, but the resort community, and I specifically am the go-to for the property management, and we handle these in-house. So I'd like to look at that redundancy also in terms of law enforcement. I think government camp, very specifically being its geographic location, I think this would be a very hard thing to police in any regard. We have a hard time getting police up there for issues that we have right now that we can't handle. So trying to police something in government camp specifically would be tough. I think one of the ways, if I'm looking for solutions, it could be zoning. MRR, HR are specific to government camp, so I think we could look at that as a policing or as a guideline as to how to enforce that. But I think these condominiums in government camp specifically were developed for rentals and tourism, and I'd like for that to potentially be an exception.
Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Mark Skinner. I live on River Forest Road in Oak Grove. And I was gratified to hear from the first speaker because it turns out there's an Airbnb in Clackamas County that's even worse than the one across the street from me. And that one really illustrates the difficulties of enforcement with problem properties, okay? It's routinely occupied by 15 people, many cars. We've had gatherings there of 75 people. We've had a bunch of drunken males using the pool at 4 in the morning, talking about getting their guns out. We've had what clearly amount to gang parties in this house, and we're frightened, okay? We're frightened that there's going to be violence. We have tried everything we can to address these problems, working with the sheriff, working with the owner who is completely unresponsive and unrepentant. The company, Airbnb, has no real interest in policing its owners. And so, you know, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. I mean, I feel like these regulations are pretty good, and they've definitely gotten better, and staff's done a really good job of improving them. But I think there's still some issues, and in particular, dealing with these serious problem properties where the sheriff has no record of all the calls that have been made to that property. We're just really concerned that these regulations will not address these serious problem properties. These are party houses, and I live on a narrow street, no center line. We will have 15 cars parked on the street when there's a big event there. In contrast to one of the previous speakers, I think 15 people in one of these Airbnb houses is too many. I'd rather see it at about 8. I think that'd be pretty reasonable because, we get big groups of men and they misbehave constantly in that property. And we're at our wit's end. There's nothing we can do about it. You call the sheriff might come out, the sheriff might be too busy. They tell him to be quiet. For example, they tell him to be quiet, and then 3 days later, it's a different group of people that they're telling to be quiet. And there's no feedback to the owner, and there's no mechanism to correct the owner's lack of oversight over his guests. And honestly, it's so bad. because I've got 3 of them surrounding me. It's so bad, I'm thinking of moving, and that's the reason I'm going to move. So I just think a lot of attention needs to be paid to enforcement and how that's really going to work. And I also think, for example, like, I don't know what the mechanism is to help the county help people comply, but I think it would be very valuable to have an online database of Airbnb hosts, because you're going to have that. That information is going to be available. I mean, if we have people and we think they're misbehaving, how do we deal with that?
You need to finish up.
I'll cut it up right there. Thank you.
And that is something we're considering. Paul?
Yeah,
I had
so-
a question, and then Brett, I want to ask you something.
So it's Mark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark's, before you leave, if you could leave your phone number, contact, I've got your email, can barely make it out, but if you could leave a phone number. I know River Forest Drive pretty well, I live in Oak Grove myself.
Okay.
But I just want to ask you a question, so you've experienced it. Do you think one parking space per car on the street's adequate for 15 occupants?
Well, this guy's got a big driveway.
Oh, this particular one does?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the requirements.
Not an
It's
issue.
One car.
Yeah.
One off-street parking.
One off-street parking space per 2 sleeping areas,
Oh, per 2 sleeping areas.
but a minimum of 1. So in other words, if you have 1, you don't get to say I get 0.
Yep. But I'd like to talk to you further about code enforcement and if you've called, so.
So Brad, I assume they pay the TRT, you guys pay the TRT.
That's correct, about 125,000 last year alone.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is all under, my question is multiple rentals. Is it one license for multiple rentals?
So he's talking about condominiums, and so those would each be considered a dwelling unit. It's, an apartment or condominiums are multifamily units.
So each one would need a license? And you said how many units?
The resort itself is 199.
thank
We
you.
manage about 75 to 100 of those, depending on the time of year.
But they're not all Airbnbs.
No, only 2 have residents.
Not all short-term rentals. Or are they short-term rentals?
We don't,
You don't know.
that's an interesting question, because I deal with that on the sewer board in government camp too, because we deal with the same problem as to how we bill customers. But we as a community don't have a database of rental. So again, we have 2 full-time residents up there. If I had to take an educated guess, I would say 90% of those rent in some capacity. So most are short-term rentals, yes.
Okay.
Again, I was vice president of the development company. I sold every single one of these units. I met these people. There have been turnover from generation, kids' ski teams they get off. I mean, that's why they bought them. So it's a major part of the economic. We have other land up in government camp we're looking to develop, and this would have an impact on that.
Well,
Appreciate you being here.
It looks like something we ought to talk about is the number of units that is managed under one company.
Yeah.
Because that would be a lot.
Right.
Every one of those, but we'll have to talk about that one. We haven't talked about that one. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Fran Mazzara and Diane Neffendorf. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Okay, I'll admit to it. We're the ones that called Ken. They were setting off fireworks, a drunken group, at 3 in the morning into our dry woods up in Welch's, and we got no responses from the police. And he happens to be a friend and likes my carrot cake. To address the gentleman real quick on government camp versus Welch's, we have to look at the whole situation and divide recreational vacation areas from residential areas. Period. We have 2 different animals. We are private residential areas. And adjacent to us, we have 2 homes in particular. We have 4 of them within 5 houses of us. One next door, the one across the street are the worst. It reads on VRBO, and I will leave this for your records. Fantastic place for family and friends. Situated in a quiet cul-de-sac. Great place for entertaining or even have small wedding, 75 people. And a great place for training and seminars. Our street's 500 feet long and 40 feet wide. The house next door, equal. Calling the owners, the management, I have pictures. I have sent them. They know me very well at your office. They're doing a great job, and nobody has bitten my head off, so I thank you for that. We called the management company. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The street was already filled with cars. A car comes down, misses the driveway, and drives into a tree to stop him from running into the house. Gets out of the car and staggers to the front door. It is only 5 o'clock in the evening. We call the management company. Oh no, we rented that to 2 couples with a baby. We find out it was a wedding. There were well over 50 people. They filled the house, picture windows, you could see them like this. The front porch, the back porch, the drive. This is a weekly event. Why are we not forcing these people to go to zoning and get approval for special event sites? We have weddings, we have parties. These are strangers. They come in, they're there for 2 days, they disappear. The last conversation I had, I managed to get through to the owner. The owner was in Europe. Oh, my management says that there's only a couple there. 2 in the morning. You have a house full of drunks. It's winter. Oh, we shouldn't be bothered by their noise. What happens when you get 20 drunks and it starts to snow at 2 a.m.? Everybody to the hot tub. Every dog in the area is barking as these people are hooting and hollering. They put the trash out. The management company comes in on a Monday. They clean it up. They put the trash out. Pickup is on Thursday. Do you know what the critters do to that trash? I have a couple that I hire to go pick up the trash. Snowplows cannot turn around on our road. Joe was in the hospital last year. You guys know what happened to him. We could not get home for a week. We had to stay in the hotel in Portland because their cars were blocking the streets so the snowplows couldn't get through. This is a residential area. Government Camp is not a residential community.
Thank you, Fran. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Diane Effendorf, and we have a small farm out on Springwater Road. We started doing the Airbnb many years ago, just on a whim, just through our house. We had a lot of success with that, but the farm that we live on, we just have 7.5 acres, and it's zoned EFU. All the other farms around us have, 40, 60, 100 acres. What we farm, though, is Scottish Highland cows. And the farm that we live on, we have 7 outbuildings behind us. And to have cows, you need a pasture and you need hay. And that's about it. I don't really want to store hay in the cottage that we have there and all these pre-existing buildings that were already there. We added one, but it's under 200 square feet. So these buildings, they have no plumbing to them. They have electricity. They have no kitchen or appliances to it. So what I'm suggesting is that through EFU or this unincorporated Clackamas County, rather than just the main house to be that each one should be assessed as to if that could be considered like a separate bedroom, because again, there's no plumbing and everything, and what else are we gonna use it for? Or can we use that as some sort of like a living space area for if people were to come, once we get registered, that they stay in the house, but they can also use these back buildings for other things. So we had nothing but great experiences with it. I had a disgruntled relative who called and complained on it, so that was the whole problem. So we haven't been doing it, but we can't afford just the cows alone on our property. So we may have to end up moving if we can't continue doing it the way that we had it. So again, I think it should be a case-by-case thing that people can come out and look things over and then check it off from there, because I know it's been positive. We brought money into the area that would have never been spent there otherwise. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. I think yours is, I actually live on a very similar piece of property, except it's RRFF 5. So rural, residential, farm, and forest.
Good.
And yours is unique. It's EFU. That makes it much more difficult, probably impossible to do that. So I don't know that we could do anything about that, but there is legislation being looked at to open up opportunities for tourism that could provide some options. The place right next to me has 7 houses, but it's a church. And so they have the church and 7 buildings that people live in, mostly people who are at the church. So I don't know. It used to have camping, and a hotel, but things have changed a lot since then. So yours is more of a challenge. I don't know that we can address it through this issue. But thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fran. So next we have Lauren Hartman and Jean Chapin, one of those. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Well, my name is Lauren Hartman. I live in Beaver Creek, Oregon with my husband, Ted Bancroft, and we're organic farmers, so thank you so much for the pollination resolution today. We're happy to hear that you're all doing the right thing. We have 2 parcels of land. We live on one and we have a farm on the other. We're organic blueberry farmers. We raise lavender, and we're getting old. So we're trying to figure out, ways to make a living and ways to look at retirement. So we have a farmhouse on the farm property, and we're using it as a farm stay, farm rental. And we're kind of on the other side of the situations that were described, in that we feel like we're trying to protect our guests that come, because oftentimes we're hearing explosions and guns and all kinds of things going off in the neighborhood. So we have people coming from all parts of the country to come stay and have a bit of the country. And they often come with a couple of small children, and they're usually young families that are coming to learn about farm life and coming to a quiet place, beautiful place in Oregon. So we, do our best to ensure that we have good people that come visit our farm. And we're hoping that, I understand in reading the purpose that we're looking at public safety and livability issues. I totally understand, the issues that have been brought forth here as far as some of the problems that folks have had in their communities, and I empathize with them. We haven't had that kind of experience. We haven't had those kinds of guests at our house. We know who's there. We're on the property. We monitor it. We take care of it.
And we want our guests to have a good experience in our neighborhood. So our concern is from the other side of protecting our guests against what's going on in our neighborhood. We've had a couple of murders. We've had, crazy people driving up and down the streets. So, it's kind of the other end of the spectrum. The other concern I have is that we're trying to support agritourism, and this is a way for a lot of small farmers to be able to make a little bit of money to continue to support themselves in their retirement, and and to be able to keep themselves in our homes. I had a couple of questions and concerns also about item number 3 under B, the land use compatibility statement. What is this going to entail going to the Planning and Zoning Division? I've lived here for 30 years, and in my 30 years, unfortunately, I have never had anyone say anything positive about the Planning Department. It's always been a very difficult and uncomfortable experience in dealing with the Planning Department. So I hope that what you do will help, I guess, take into consideration those of us who are trying to do the right thing and trying to make a little bit of money. And perhaps the other concern is the registration fee. So for those of us who charge a small amount and make a small amount, $800 to $900 a year is a huge amount of money for us.
That's every 2 years.
Oh, every 2 years. Well,
Still a lot of money.
Still a lot of money for those of us who don't make a lot of money, compared to government camp, who has 190 whatever. We pay our taxes too. Every time we have a guest, we pay every month on time. So we do our due diligence, but thanks for hearing me out.
What's the difference between like hers, a bed, it sounds like sort of a bed and breakfast.
Well, it's considered a farm stay. People come, hang out on the farm, and we don't provide breakfast. They just rent the farm for a short period of time, and, that's it.
Aren't the rules
What's the
different for a bed
difference?
and breakfast?
What's the difference between a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast?
Well, from a farm stay, let's say.
I don't know. I don't know specifically what she's doing. A bed and breakfast implies that the operator is there on the property and hosting the guests in that dwelling.
And that's
And then
not what
also
happens.
serving them breakfast. It sounds like she might have a second dwelling on a separate piece of property that she's managing as a standalone rental, which is not a bed and
Don't
breakfast.
tell us where you're at, because that's not legal, in other words,
Maybe.
right?
It's considered a short-term rental.
Yeah,
And
so
we're
you would
paying
have to
transient
register.
tax as a short-term rental.
Okay, great. All right, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jean Chapin, and I live on River Forest Road. In fact, I'm Mark's neighbor, and I could give you horror stories about the house he described. He didn't mention that it has a pool, a hot tub, and an extensive play area in the back for both adults and children. But as I listen to everything tonight, what I hear emerging is kind of two threads. One is the big house that hosts a lot of people, and therefore becomes a nuisance in the neighborhood, and the whole residential versus recreational area issue. I think it's worth a thought to try and separate those two, and to also deal with special regulations for houses that hold a lot of people, because our house is advertised on Airbnb, the one that Mark referred to, as a great resort area for large groups. And he's right, there's tons of cars, there's 15, 20 people in the backyard from morning till night. So starting in May, April, if the weather's willing, through October, it's like Disneyland in our backyard. It's just, they're so loud. So, I think that one of the things I think you should also address is the noise ordinance. The Clackamas County noise ordinance doesn't really go very far, and most of us don't have a decibel meter with us when we're walking down the street. The sheriff certainly doesn't. We have called on that house so many times. In fact, I called the sheriff to try and get a list of our complaints, because I didn't log them. You don't log them either, so they're not logged. So there's no way for me to tell you I called 30 times last summer. But from May till October, it's just like your long-term rentals. It's a long-term rental. It's a party house from morning till night. And so I think addressing the noise ordinance and also logging it, making sure there's a way for us to complain to the county so that if a homeowner, and our homeowner he really doesn't care. He says he lives there, but he doesn't live there. He has multiple properties. So the noise is a really big issue, and I think just counting on the county's noise ordinances doesn't work. So,
All right, thank you very much.
yeah.
We have Gus Castaneda and Nancy Scott. So we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more people on our list. Do you want to break after this one or continue?
Take a short break.
I'd like to just.
Okay, short break after you two. All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gus Castaneda, and I'm a resident of Tigard. I do own a second home, a vacation home in Government Camp as well, and it's a condominium that has 12 units. In this HOA, there's about 4 other owners that have the same investment as I do. We use the short rental for families and for myself primarily, but when I'm not using it, I like to share the mountain with everyone else. I have had that one experience where, the one party, where I don't really remember how many people were there, but, they were out of hand and they got drunk and what have you. But outside of that one experience, which we managed, I can't tell you how many hundreds of other visitors have been there enjoying the facilities, and primarily families and, with kids. So I do have a concern about the limitation of the occupancy. I think there is I reason with the safety of the use of the facility, make sure that there's not more people than the property could occupy. But I don't want to discourage the families from staying there, and again, the children and other number of adults. In addition, it is my second home, so my property would not qualify as well, and it's an investment for me, and I would not be able to afford it if I don't have the additional income. I think that's all I can facilitate for you at this point.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name's Nancy Scott. I live at 1500 Southwest Borland Road, and we have an Airbnb. We've had one for 7 years. I'm an Airbnb superhost. I'm also a founding member of Host to Host, which is a trade association for short-term rental owners. And I want to thank county staff really for the magnificent job they've done. I have witnessed what's happened in Portland through my friends and Host to Host. This is a completely different process, and I'm particularly grateful for the affidavit of compliance that is in this process, because Portland has a backlog that's crazy. Their enforcement is spotty. It's not working as well as hosts wish it did, of course. And so I first wanted to thank, as a host, you guys in the county for a thorough and thoughtful process. I also wanted to address the occupancy limits. It sounds, after talking to Martha, like that'd be fine. I have 2 queen beds in a large room, and we get lots of families. We're a 5-acre tree farm, and lots of families come for the same reasons we've heard to enjoy Clackamas County, and we're a mile from Willamette. Everybody loves Willamette and loves going there, so I consider us to be an asset. I think saying you can have 2 people plus 2 is not going to be very clear to people. I do have 2 large rooms, so apparently I do qualify to have 4 guests, but it's not really clear, and I do think hotels being able to have a double occupancy of 2 queens with 2 people each, I think that should be allowed. Perhaps not if there's 5 bedrooms, but I think the 15-person max is going to address that. So I just think that needs to be addressed and not make it more restrictive than a hotel, especially for a small suite like we have. I also wanted to agree that $900 every 2 years is going to be kind of difficult for a lot of people. I fully intend to comply. I've complied with the transient room tax, and we'll continue to do it. But there are people, we're booked almost 100% all summer, starting in the spring through the fall, because it's a tree farm and it's the quintessential Oregon experience. Love it, and our guests love it from all over the world. But I think it will be hard for a retired person with maybe 1 room, and a visiting nurse is a common thing that people have in Airbnb, to do that $900 a year. So I would ask that you take a look at that. I also wanted to offer host-to-host help if there are issues or things that you want to discuss about host relations. Airbnb, we work and we're respected by Airbnb, which has an office here in Portland. And if there are issues of enforcement, Airbnb just is now working on tightening up their regs so that party houses are a thing of the past. They've had huge problems, as you probably know, with party houses. And I can't tell you what those regulations are, but Airbnb doesn't like party houses either. And so that, I think, is underway. So that's all I have, and thank you again.
So did you say something about nurses?
Though there's visiting nurses come in and do short stays at Oregon, at OHSU. And so Portland hosts a lot of times will do, and I'm assuming there might be some in Clackamas County, I'm not sure. One nurse, 20 days, and they might only do it occasionally. So $900 might be a difficulty.
All right, thank you. All right.
Break time.
That's it, what?
Break time, right?
Oh, yeah, we decided we were going to take a break. Okay, let's take a 5-minute?
Okay.
5-minute break. Well, we got to wait for, I guess it's automatically recorded, isn't it? All right, so we'll get started again, and Pat from Aldercrest, I can't read your last name, and Karen, it looks like Bateman, come on up. Karen and Pat. No Pat? Sure that says Pat Shellman or something like that? Nope, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Karen Bateman. Good evening, County Commissioners. I'm here this evening to address my concerns about the proposed regulations for vacation rentals in unincorporated Clackamas County. As the owner of 2 vacation rental cabins in Rhododendron, I will be directly affected by the proposed regulations. Many of the concerns addressed in the regulations are already being implemented on a daily basis by responsible owners. Trash is collected, properties meet safety standards, noise restrictions are clearly addressed in house rules, and the owners make certain guests follow them. Also, in order to be an Airbnb and other sites, owners need to meet specific safety standards and respect local noise laws. Responsible owners, such as myself, work hard to make sure that the vacation rental guests have no impact on our neighbors. Unfortunately, a small percentage of vacation rental owners do not adhere to these standards by Airbnb, other rental agencies, as well as local government. They cram way too many people into their rentals, disrespect noise and burn laws, and do not respond to neighbors' concerns about loud parties or other nuisance activities on their properties. This is unacceptable. But rather than implement regulations that will necessitate the need for new infrastructure and staff to be implemented and enforced that will have a detrimental effect on property owners that are responsible, the better solution is for the county to put more money toward code enforcement to root out the owners who abuse the privilege of running a vacation rental. This leads me to the economic impact these proposed regulations might have in the Mount Hood communities. In 2013, over 1,342,400 people came to Mount Hood, and that figure has only grown since then. This is the reason that vacation rental business has expanded in the area, as the existing overnight housing infrastructure could not accommodate the numbers of people that visit the mountain on a yearly basis. As a vacation rental owner, I support local businesses by providing my guests with recommendations for restaurants, grocery stores, coffee shops, skiing, and hiking information. We employ a staff of housekeepers and management people that make sure our properties meet the highest standard, and they are an integral part of running our vacation rentals. Many people are employed by the business and will be adversely affected by implementing these regulations as owners choose to drop out of the business for financial reasons. The ripple effect in the community could be profound. In conclusion, the proposed regulations are not the answer to address complaints about vacation rentals who violate noise, safety standards, and are bad neighbors. The answer is increased code enforcement to address the obvious problem properties. The majority of owners take pride in their vacation rentals, strive to give their guests a 5-star experience, and to be the very best of neighbors. The vacation rental business performs a needed service that has a beneficial effect on the local economy of the Mount Hood recreational area. For this reason, I ask that the Commission take a more measured approach, and to extend the review period to address communities' concerns. Thank you.
And thank you. So it looks like David Bateman, you were here also. And Craig, Thiry, maybe? Theory?
Yeah, theory.
Thank you for coming.
Go ahead.
I'm here, I'm going to represent our real estate agent. I'm her proxy for the evening. Her name is Monica Farina. She asked me to read the speech for her, because my wife already covered other things for us personally. Okay, so. I am, good evening, County Commissioners. I am the sole provider for a family of 6 and have been in the real estate industry since 1994. I have been selling real estate on Mount Hood specifically for the last 5 years. 80% of my clientele looking to buy in our beautiful area do so with the intention of having it as a vacation home. This involves the ability to subsidize the mortgage payments by offering their homes or sites such as Vacasa and through the local property management companies. Timberline Lodge alone attracts 2 million visitors each year. Having very little means to accommodate the masses, the need for vacation rental cabins in the area have become not only a luxury but a necessity. In the last few years, 2 HOAs, Arawana and Windtree, have banned short-term rentals, and I have witnessed their values plunge over $100,000, some larger homes much more. If the county were to impose the volume of restrictions and regulations as well to go as far as require a copy of taxes, I can tell you that the real estate market on Mount Hood will become very depressed. Not only will this affect real estate property values, it will have a negative effect on the restaurants, housekeepers, handymen, and retail stores in the area, hereby limiting those business owners' ability to support their families and employ local residents. Of course, I realize rental homeowners should be made to keep up their business licenses and pay their hotel tax. Having current contact information for the homeowner and their property managers is important in case there are issues with specific rentals. However, the majority of vacation cabin owners have been maintaining their properties very professionally. I ask you to take a deeper look at what you are suggesting to be applied to cabin owners in our beautiful and thriving territory and reconsider the rules, regulations, and terms, and extend the time for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. My name is Craig Thiry. I own a duplex in Oak Grove. Guess I'm Paul's neighbor. And I have a duplex there that I bought a while ago, and I'm contemplating, I rent half of it for long-term rental right now, contemplating going to short-term rental. And so I guess my first question is kind of maybe for staff, but I'm curious, you say short-term rental properties on unincorporated land outside the Portland metropolitan urban growth boundary would be required to be the owner's primary residence or located on the same lot as the owner's primary residence. The owner would not be required to be there when the short-term rental is occupied. I'm just curious, what's the spirit and intent behind that? What are you trying to prevent?
So that was added to the regulations at the request of the board, and it was largely a concern for the effect of short-term rentals on housing that's affordable for residents to live there on longer term.
Okay. So
And if I can clarify, do you mind? I know you're on your time. If you have a duplex, you have 2 dwellings on one lot. If you're living in one of them, that's your primary residence. You would be able to do that. And so that.
let me get to my next point, because I partitioned the duplex. So now it's 2 single-family residences with a party wall. So, but I'm right there, I am the neighbor, so it's technically would be 2 lots, right? So would I not be able to rent this?
That's a new one.
I suppose, does it say lot of record or does it say lot? I mean, we could define lot as a tract, I suppose, if you own both of the lots, it's all part of yours. We could consider something like that. I think right now it just says lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, we'll look at that.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Pascal and Lynn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I had contemplated possibly renting a room in my house just a few weekends a year. And the idea of having to pay a sum between $800–900, even if it's every 2 years, is a huge amount of money. I am presently unemployed, That's a big burden. I cannot be the only person who would just think about doing this on a very occasional basis.
So this is, it sounds to me like an incidental use. If you're renting it a few times, it's not a means of producing revenue. Isn't that what we talked about earlier today? An
Yeah, but I would
incidental
still
use?
register it on Airbnb.
Pardon?
I would still
it's
register.
on Airbnb.
I would still put it on there. I'm not saying it's on Airbnb. I would still put it on Airbnb because that's the way I would be able to maybe find someone.
Okay.
So let's say summertime, 4 weekends, and then nothing the rest of the year.
Well,
$900 is a lot of
Yeah,
money.
but Airbnb is going to take most of that money from you, so it's not going to be a
They're
good
not
deal.
going to take most of that money from me. They're going to take a percentage of it, and the most I can get from a room at my house is maybe $40 a night. So make the calculations. That's let's say $250 a year, and then I have to pay easily $500 a year, possibly. Let's say $900 every 2 years. That's a lot of money to make no money.
All right. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Len?
Good evening. I'm Len Schauber, board member of the Stafford Hamlet, live on Borland Road, and thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I'm also chair of the Stafford Lower Tualatin Valley CPO. And a couple of comments I've got as far as what the discussion's been going on this evening, I thought was very appropriate. As far as the occupancy requirements right now, where you say 2 per bedroom, maximum of 2 extra, I would like to suggest that you would have allowances for families, because if they have little kids, if you had 2 families in there, 2 parents each, they would only have allowed to have one child each to be there to be legal. Most families have 2 or 3 little children. So I would suggest that you have allowances for a higher number of children and set an age limit of, say, 10 or what it would be. It would be a max of 3 under the age of 10, something like that, per family. And then that would be a suggestion. The second thing would be the fees that are listed are $900 per year, independent of where the facility is located. I would suggest that you have fees dependent upon zoning, where EFU would maybe different than RFF5, and if there's other zoning inside the unincorporated areas, which is inside the urban growth boundary, which I don't know what the zonings would be, but that may be different as far as what you would assess, possibly. And the third thing I would like to bring up is the fact that code enforcement is going to be a problem, because right now code enforcement is a problem countywide with other areas, because they just are not staffed properly and they don't have enough money to do what they need to do. So to put this extra load on code enforcement, you need to address specifically how you're going to help them out as far as having the proper support. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. I think that enforcing the number of children would be very difficult. Be a really tough. I think the story is keep it simple, stupid, and we need to keep it as simple as we possibly can. So it's not too complicated, but, the number of children versus the number of adults, I don't know how we would police that one.
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of the gentleman that just made the point about code enforcement, part of the purpose of the fee is to be able to hire additional code enforcement. So that's what it's there to pay for. So.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public portion of this, and
Did we miss anybody? What is your name?
what did we?
Oh, Ryan. You didn't call Ryan. He's on the list.
Oh, I crossed him out. No, come on up.
And you called Pat?
Yeah, Pat.
But he didn't come up?
No, there was,
Okay.
Pat must have left.
Okay.
Probably got stung.
They were stingless bees.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you for making time for one more. I'm Ryan Tigner. I own a property management company that specifically manages short-term rentals. I manage over 70 short-term rentals, 25 of which are in Clackamas County. We market them on over 85 different channels: Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, Expedia, TripAdvisor, all of them. In 2019, we hosted 7,900 guests here in the Clackamas County area, about 5,000 nights. Our company paid almost a little under $200,000 in transient lodging taxes. Of all of our properties, we had 0 cops or nuisance complaints. We go above and beyond to make sure that we get the write guests in there, and they have a great stay. We only rent to people over 25. We do 2, 3, 4-night minimums. We don't rent to locals last minute, so we're never a party spot. We use technology to monitor the number of people in the house and also the noise levels of the house. The people visiting these areas, because about 12 of them are within that urban growth boundary of Portland, are extended families of Clackamas County residences. They're coming for baby showers, weddings, birthdays, 4th of July's, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's not people from like Florida or Arizona that want to have a bachelor party in Oregon City. So a lot, and 12 of these that I do manage, people have now either moved to another place because they got married or they had children and their circumstances changed, and so these are not their primary residences. So, what I would ask is that, addressing the rents going up for local people, what that's preventing is then a bunch of people investing in short-term rentals or investment companies to buy them and make a lot of money doing short-term rentals. I would ask that they adopt a code just like Seattle has, where it says hosts are allowed to rent out one dwelling unit or part of one in addition to their primary residence, because I don't think it's bad for people to have one rental property. If it left it the way it was, all 12 of those owners wouldn't be able to afford those homes and they'd have to sell them. And it sounds like even like the lady who has the 2 farm parcels, or it would solve the parcel problem of the duplex as well, if you could have one dwelling unit in addition to your primary residence. So that's the part I came to address.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'll close the public portion of this hearing, and what do you guys want to do? Talk tonight?
I have a question.
Okay. Paul?
I mean, we maybe do questions or comments.
Either works.
Yeah, so I say this with respect for our staff, especially Michelle, code enforcement, Cheryl, all those, you guys I know how difficult it is to do the work you do. And, so in short, I'll be as brief as I can. Someone files a complaint, let's just say it's solid waste, in front of their home. Staff goes out there, takes pictures, goes through the process, so on and so forth. And then they really got to identify there's really a problem. And then take the action necessary to do it. In this case, on the short-term rental side, my concern is that, the people that are gone or the violation is gone on Monday morning, right? They're there late Friday, Saturday, Sunday, boom, they're gone. Monday morning, there is no code violation. And maybe the nuisance element, there's an avenue there after a certain number of complaints. But yes, part of this money is going to go towards hiring one code enforcement person and also going to hire one staff person to collect the monies and also have a means of logging for the collection of tourism taxes. But my concern, I guess, staff, if the staff could speak to, what unique mechanism is our staff going to have to actually have effective code enforcement, knowing that we have limited resources, our law enforcement arms, whether they're in unincorporated, we can't impose this mechanism ordinance on cities, right? So it's unincorporated, so that means it's Clackamas County Sheriff. And they've got more calls and not enough manpower. I think the same goes for code enforcement. So we already have a disparity or a lack of ability to meet all those needs. So what are we going to do different in this unique case that's going to deliver the results for the dollars we're charging, that's going to make the lives better for the people who live in those neighborhoods? That's the part I'm struggling with, and if anyone could help me with that, I'd appreciate it, because I've heard some very valid complaints. We've heard them for a long time. How?
Hi, again, I'm Cheryl Bell. I am with Code Enforcement, among other things. I have with me Michelle Ammon. She is the supervisor manager of the Code Enforcement program. So I'm going to let Michelle start.
What I was going to tell you, when I read the code, at first I was a little taken back because, yes, we are short-staffed. But the way it's written, it is a special program. So it is one individual code enforcement officer enforcing this new code. So it is a different code than we currently have. With that, the way it's written, that is something that the one code enforcement officer could address.
So let's just take the Mazzaras. who had a situation up there, different people every weekend. So just mechanically, how would that work for their situation?
They currently have things we can address. It may not have come to us in the sense that it may have come to us currently that it's short-term rentals, rather than there are these other other violations that we could address. So I've given them my card so I can help a couple of them. In that case, when it comes in with the new code, the way it's written, there are steps that we can automatically go through. It's a little bit shorter timeline, the way the process is written out. And we will be going to hearing a lot more often the way that this is written, so we can move through the process, because this code is completely different than what we currently have. There are additions to 2.07, which is our administration, that would help us through that process.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should also note, though, some of the issues that were brought forward and are serious are within the sheriff's office, and they are not addressed in this code and will not be addressed by code enforcement. Noise, drinking in public, drug use in public, parking in the right-of-way, those will still stay with the sheriff's office, and they are not something that code enforcement would enforce.
With that, those are things, though, that could be in addition to the other violations that can make it a chronic nuisance through our NLP property, or NLP team. So there are things that we currently can address in conjunction with the sheriff's office.
Okay. So recently, you're probably aware of it, we had someone come and testify a few weeks ago, a lady who had a violation filed against her, and she was upset because that is on the record of the property, right? It followed her. So these complaints, whether they're short-term, long-term, or something completely altogether different, are filed on the property. Is it possible for anyone to just plug in the address, like the example I believe Martha had earlier, and just find out what the violations are on the property and use that as a measurement?
That can happen, yes. That is one way. We're also looking at possibly using the same system to be able to look at who the owner is. So if you didn't get that letter or you lost it, that's another system that maybe we can find out who that responsible party is. And then also I informed the citizens that spoke that all police calls are tracked through our dispatch system, and I can pull that information to see how many calls they've had, along with how many code enforcement calls there are for that chronic nuisance. So it's tracked multiple ways.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at Manzanita today, and Manzanita has a list of all Airbnb, all properties rented, with the contact person and phone number right there. So you literally log on to their website and search, and it found it. Ken?
Yes, what I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, is based on the concerns I outlined at the beginning of this process today, as well as what I heard from the audience today. I think there's some additional questions we want to try and address in the ordinance. So rather than moving to a second hearing, I'm going to suggest that we table this so we can work with staff a little more and see if we can fine-tune this on some of the issues that were raised tonight.
Well, we can also move it to, we can close the hearing tonight, move it to the final reading, and have those discussions depending upon what kind of amendments you want to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we do have some options here. If we anticipate that there are going to be amendments to the ordinance, what I'd recommend is that we continue the first reading, because what we don't want to have is substantial changes between first and second reading. And so
that was my
continuing-
concern and why I said tabling.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah.
table it.
So
We continue the hearing.
Continue, okay.
We would continue first
Let's do
reading, make sure that we're, leaving first reading with the draft that we're satisfied with. And so when you come into second reading, it's,
Well, if the chair is amenable to a motion, then I would move that we, give me the phrase again,
Continue.
please.
go ahead and continue.
That we
first reading.
continue this hearing to a later date.
I'll second that. I feel the same way you do, Commissioner, and I'm trying to wrap my head around the differences between the folks that are actually professionally managing multiple properties versus people who are just kind of having single rentals. To me, there's a distinct difference with how that is managed, and I'd like to take a little longer to review this information and see if we can't grapple with that a little bit.
And I agree. I was going to say that one thing you just said. One size does not fit all. And so, the mountain government camp obviously is quite different from Fran's neighborhood. or within
Paul's
the
neighborhood.
urban, or Paul's neighborhood as far as that goes.
Or the Collins
But I think
Lake,
it would
yeah.
be appropriate tonight to mention some of your ideas so that they can work on those. So Paul.
Okay. Yeah, during the break, I spoke to a couple folks out there and let them know about our NLP program, right? And the NLP program is Nuisance Livability Project, I believe, or Neighborhood Livability Project for nuisances. That's what it is. And so if there's a property where there's continual complaints on and they're logged, at one point, there's a threshold level which becomes identified as an NLP, eligible for an NLP program in which we actually pursue those property owners for those violations. And so anyone out there that's watching or listening, that's a tool that maybe I don't think a lot of people even knew exist. It's relatively new. We put it in place here 3 years ago to address some of the things for just our goals, quality of life, livability in our neighborhoods. But that's something that I think we should be looking at, and it counts on all those calls that get logged into the sheriff's office. So even though you may not get a response, it's logged, as Michelle stated earlier.
And so what we ask is to please call every time there is an issue, because one of the, I've spoke to a few neighbors lately, and they don't call when there are issues, and so it's not tracked, because they don't think they're going to get service. Even calling it in so that we see how many calls at that address will help us to move forward on that property.
Yeah, and anyone who's watching, the other thing I've told people is not only call, but if you can actually make a personal log of the date and time you called the sheriff's office, that way they should reconcile. And let's just make sure that they're actually getting logged. But that's a tool, and whenever we see these situations where the county commissioners get involved or one of us gets involved, we'll meet with the neighborhood. And sometimes those meetings are rather large, and we have a lot of people that are complaining. But we tell them, and the sheriff's office tells them, call, call, call. You have to call, and without the calls, it doesn't get logged. It doesn't ever become eligible for a nuisance.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
But isn't that to address like trash?
Anything.
Yeah, but
Any
just a
nuisance on a
party one
property.
weekend?
Any continual nuisance of any sort.
Yeah, but what's a continual nuisance?
There has to be code enforcement issues at the property and also law enforcement. So if there are crimes happening, if there's public indecency, chronic noise violations, plus it doesn't always have to have both, but often there are both. The code violations of if there is solid waste, any of those, it's the totality of it all. And so if there are constant parties with the noise and all of the and it's chronic issues there, code enforcement and sheriff's office, then we can address that through a chronic nuisance, which is even above and beyond the NLP team addressing it. It's one of our tools that we use.
Yeah, I think there's another mechanism other than that, and that is if the fine is big enough, people are eventually going to stop doing it. So, 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. You pay a license fee, you get a permit to do it, you get a contact information, you get 1 complaint, it's okay, you're going to straighten up, maybe 2 straighten up. Third one, you get a big fine or something. I remember when I was mayor of Milwaukee, this developer cut down all the trees, public right of way, everything. $15,000 fine. You think he didn't add that to the price of the house? Of course he did. He had 25 houses he could spread that cost. You can't do that if you have a Airbnb that you're renting out and the fine's $500 the third time or something, and your license is revoked after. That's stuff we can talk about. But right now, it's illegal to have one of these STRs. It's illegal to have them. What would we enforce? We'd have a lot of enforcement to do because they're all illegal. So first off, we got to allow them, and then we have to regulate them, and we have to collect enough money, pay for the cost of doing that. It seems pretty simple to me. I guess that's where keep it simple, stupid comes from. I just, the one within the urban growth boundary, I think somebody had a good comment, you don't have to necessarily live there. This is probably one debate we have, but you don't necessarily have to live there. You can have one rental in your name. But I have an Airbnb, and we have to have a management company, or you have to have your phone number. And you got 30 minutes or 45 minutes to get there. And if you don't live there, then you get a violation, a citation. And then, in where we have a Airbnb, they fine you pretty substantially over so many violations, and they can take your license away. So I think that's what we got to look at but the other thing that I think is important, and I think that we need to allow people to have property that, farm stays, and this has nothing to do with farm stays, but there's a lot of properties out there that people are struggling to survive on. Growth in property taxes and various other things, metro bonds, school bonds, stuff like that. It's more and more expensive, and having some source of revenue is valuable. And when there's an opportunity to do that, I think we should, make that possible as long as they obey the rules. Paul?
Well, there's one element that has struck me all along, and again tonight, and that is that there are some very good, responsible operators.
Yeah.
There's some people that actually go to the effort of hiring a management firm and paying a fee to making sure that rental is well-maintained and they get good tenants in there. They go the extra mile. So they're paying a fee. And I'm sure that some people think that this may be punitive, right? And I think there's some element that I think the good operators ought to be somewhat rewarded, and the bad operators are the ones that ought to pay. And there ought to be some offset for that. But I can imagine that if you don't rent these out very often and your volume is low, that fee could be awfully burdensome. So I recognize that, and that made an impact on me tonight.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, keep it simple, square feet. I don't know if that's simple, number of bedrooms.
That's already complicated, isn't it?
It's already pretty complicated. So it's been moved and seconded to keep the hearing open we'll set a date certain anyway. Next one is.
Yeah, so I'd recommend, well, I guess a couple things. We have a couple hearing dates already set because we anticipated a second reading. And so I believe February 13th would be the next opportunity to visit this. What I would say, I guess the challenge we're going to have as staff is not fully understanding what the board's priorities are going to be coming back to you in 2 weeks.
So let's write them up.
We'll write 'em up.
Well, and that's fine, but then the question becomes, how do you want to address those? Do you want to do that in the context like we have here tonight? Because first and second readings have a public comment component to them. Or would you rather have it in, what you commonly call a policy session, where it's staff and the board discussing, or some other forum? I think, there's pros and cons to each of those, but at least as staff, we'd like to understand that and at least have a forum to.
So when's the earliest policy session available?
Well, we could do it this coming Tuesday and just add it to the agenda because we need to get moving. so
Let's
the
do it
staff can
next
prepare.
Tuesday then.
Tuesday.
All right. I know it was a light schedule next Tuesday. So.
Room in the afternoon, yes.
All right, great. That was tough. So let me see.
Did we vote? I don't think we.
Just making sure I got everything here. All right, so all those in favor of continuing the hearing to a date certain of February 13th, 2020, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. With that, we'll close the hearing for tonight and go on to the consent agenda.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Mary, I'd ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title.
Okay. Today's consent agenda. Under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of a lease agreement number 9568 between Clackamas County Health Centers Division and Genoa Healthcare LLC for rental of clinical space.
Mary, could you pause?
Either turn the volume up or wait a second.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Realize there's still a meeting.
Hit the gavel, Jim.
What?
I don't think they realize there's still a meeting.
Oh,
One portion's over. We still have a meeting to conduct.
so we need to finish up our meeting tonight, so thank you for coming tonight.
Could you all continue your conversation outside, please?
I don't.
How about now?
That includes that Thelma lady in the back.
Hey, Thelma, keep it down back there.
Oh, no partying.
And that Jim guy who's helping her along. Yeah.
All right, so the county clerk was reading the, you're not the county clerk. You're the
Yeah.
clerk of the
I'm
board.
the clerk to the board, and I'll start over again because
Okay.
I had only read one.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, today's consent agenda. Under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of lease agreement number 9568 between Clackamas County Health Centers Division and Genoa Healthcare for rental of clinical space. Approval of lease agreement number 9570 between Clackamas County Health Centers Division and Genoa Healthcare for rental of clinical space. Under elected officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes, and approval of the 2019-2020 Victims of Crime Act Criminal Fine Account Non-Competitive Program Grant for the District Attorney's Office. Under Technology Services, approval of a service level agreement between Clackamas Broadband Exchange and West Lynn Wilsonville School District to renew existing dark fiber connections, and approval of a service level agreement between Clackamas Broadband Exchange and Estacada School District to renew existing dark fiber connection. And that concludes today's consent agenda.
Thank you, Mary. Do any of you commissioners wish to remove or pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and second that we approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. County Administrator updates.
Yes, due to the late hour, I will bypass my report other than to say I really thank the county staff from multiple departments who worked on this short-term rental proposal for years and multiple staff reports and policy sessions, and we will continue that good work for you. Thank you.
I think we're close.
I think we're close to.
All right, Martha, you're up first.
I'm, for the sake of time, just going to say it was a good meeting tonight, and let's keep those pollinators pollinating. Okay, thanks.
And then we have Ken.
And again, for the sake of time, I'm strictly going to go to the dogs.
Again.
Mary is a happy young lady. Here we are. Looking for a new family to explore this awesome place we call home. She can be a bit excitable, and she's looking forward to a new family who will help teach her and work on her training. She's not really interested in other dogs, and she thinks cats and small animals would be fun to chase, so she is going to do just best being the one and only pet in your home. She just wants all your attention to herself. She will need a family who's willing to smooth out some of the rough edges in her training. She loves to go for walks and explore, and maybe you'll love to take her on leashed hikes and walks all over the place. For more information about Mary or other adoptable dogs, please contact Dog Services at 503-655-8628 or www.clackamas.us/dogs.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'll keep it short, but I just cannot help but notice, really frankly, in the last several months, a substantial number of people having issues with car accidents on certain roads around the county, all over the county. And unfortunately, people are losing their lives or having a life-altering accident or injury as a result of that. And it's very troubling sometimes to realize that we have these challenges and problems, and there are, whether LED lighting or improvements, we have limited resources, but it's just mounting. And whether it's a state police problem on a state highway or whether it's one of our local roads, it just seems we need something, and whether that's more patrol or that's signage improvements, but nothing works better in talking to law enforcement. I met with the state police last Friday. I will just tell you that Number one solution to getting safety on roads is having a patrol presence. There's nothing that works better.
All right, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, given the lateness of the hour, I'll go ahead and defer, but just thank you, colleagues, for a productive meeting tonight, and staff, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm going to take about an hour. I thank staff for the work they did on this. I think we've come really close. I'm hoping that we'll put this behind us and staff can move on to the business they need to do. As far as your comments, Paul, you know, the Traffic Safety Commission or committee that I was on, you know, the percentage of accidents are caused by drivers. They're not patrol, they're just drivers' stupidity, driving too fast, which you might be able to reduce. But, you know, I live by that intersection, and every time I go by it, I think about it. And every time a fire truck goes up that road, once a month, I know what's happened. I can see it right from my deck, accidents. And Haynes Road is a terrible intersection, too. Probably once a month, somebody gets hit there. But we need to really look at some of those. But that's a partnership with ODOT.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look at that new era and what was the other road? I can never remember. I drive it every day. But
Central Point.
Central Point. I like what they've done there, but they need to do something to stop or slow people down more.
Can I share something with you? Yeah. So just to build on that, I had no intention of saying or suggesting that there's accidents because there's not patrol or patrol causes accidents. I'm not saying that at all. And the best example I can use is something that you know very, very, very well. And that is when the city of Milwaukee slowed their speed limit down to 30 miles an hour, right? And they start writing tickets. And they wrote tickets for 2 or 3 years. And now, even if someone tries to speed, who's new to the area, they're going to get stuck in a car in front of them that's going 30 miles an hour because they don't want a ticket. And it's those saturation patrols, and it's that saturation effort of patrols that teaches people in a neighborhood a lesson, and it actually helps reduce. And you know, I spend a lot of time talking to people who've done this for a living. It works.
Yeah, but the other thing is that people think people are driving fast and they aren't. You know, Johnson Creek Boulevard, they used to, until we started giving out the radar gun, everyone says everyone speeds. So what the police did is they put down this hose that timed what time the person was there who sped, and then they went there and ticketed those people. It was always the same people, the same time of day, who sped through that area, and that's how they ended up resolving the problem. Anyway, we got a lot of work to do. Thank you and good night.